Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 431. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim, the sensei of the whatnot, the Duke of you know, and the Minister of Spachi.
How's it going, eh? I don't know if I want that nickname.
Well, you brought it into the mix, not me. Which will make a little bit more sense after you listen to the episode. On this episode, we're going to be talking Convergence issue number 5, and obviously some of the events that were leading up to issue number 5. We're also going to be chatting about the Divergence Free Comic Book Day issue, and we have a casual chat right at the very beginning about weeks 2 through 4. Basically, the rest of the first issues. We talked very casually about just our experience with the event, some of the standout moments of those issues, just as we continue going through, obviously, the big epic event that's Convergence that we're currently reading right now. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. We are sponsored this episode, of course, by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what's going on over at DCBService.com?
Bundles, 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 man. Once again, DCBS is really doing some cool stuff with these new relaunches. We have 2 separate new bundles, each of and as well as a bundling of some of the returning series as well. And the best part about these, when you start ordering in these bundles, 50% off of the titles. And it's, the one bundle has some of the new series, the other one has the others, but we also have that really cool returning series bundles. But also, I'm very excited to say Teen Titans Go variant cover bundles, 45% off. I was like, wow, these are, again, it's going to make my ordering very easy because I'll just do bundle, 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 boom. I'm done, and I'm absolutely happy and excited. Thank you, DCBS.
Over at InStockTrades.com, I'm a big fan of the deals of the week, and I encourage you to go every week to take a look at what they're offering. They've always got books at 50% off. Like this week, they've got Batman Earth 1 hardcover volume 2 at 50% off. Captain America, The Return of Winter Soldier, Omnibus, 50% off. That Batman hardcover is 50% off, $12.49. Return of the Winter Soldier, some Omnibus is 50% off, only $49.99. The Secret Wars Prelude paperback, if you're interested in the current Marvel event, 50% off, only $17.49. Dial H, it's a new 52 series that I really enjoyed, 50% off the deluxe hardcover, only $17.49. That deluxe hardcover contains issues 0 through 15. You can get basically 16 issues of Dial H for $17.49. That's an amazing discount in a hardcover. And that's a fun series if you haven't read that one. I really enjoyed that one. It's one of sad it's not around anymore. Check them out weekly, though. InStockTrades.com, always offering amazing deals. Mr. Seguin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
What a spotchy ending. Let's talk some comics. Jim, a lot of stuff has happened since actually you were at Vegas at the con. And when you came back, the Divergence issue had been released. We've gone through now multiple issues of Convergence. And, of course, we've had many issues of the tie-ins. You and I are trying to pin down exactly what they are. And I guess we'd have to say that they're tie-ins or side story. They're really side stories, I guess, is the best way to say it. They're more of a focus on what is going on inside each dome.
Well,
and
they're the Paul Harvey of the Convergence story, because now you know the rest of the story.
Before we actually go into Divergence, let's just generally talk about, we've read a lot since we last talked. We talked really about the introduction of Convergence, the first week, we've talked about all of those books from the first week and the first 2 issues of the event. So we're now in week 5 of it. We've started to see the second issues start to come out, basically the concluding part of those stories. I don't know if you've read the second issues, and that doesn't really matter at the moment. Let's just talk about globally the event as a whole? Are you loving it? Are you in the middle? Is it not your cup of tea? How does this one work out for you, just kind of as a global event? Because there's a lot going on, and it's going to have some major impact. It looks like with the way Divergence comes out. It's really basically a cornerstone of like, this is DC now. After this, we're going somewhere else. How do you feel about everything?
Well, it's weird because I think you and I are definitely going to have a lot different reactions to this, just because a lot of these tie-in stories, I have absolutely no idea who these people are. There's a lot of the pre-crisis DC I was not reading. Some of it, I know some of these because I went back through and did backstories, and we've talked about different runs. I'm like, oh, let me pick that up, and I'll pick up a trade here or there. But as a general rule, pre-crisis Earth blank, I have no idea who it is. So going into all these stories, I didn't have a personal connection to it. So I'm basically just going by the reading that I'm getting. And I'll tell you, every story was a good story. I enjoyed reading. Some of them, I think, rang a little bit truer to me, partially because I had more of a connection with them because I actually knew something. And some of them had some really cool stories that were being told. So as an overarching story, I'm happy that this isn't just about the fighting. This isn't Mortal Kombat, throw two heroes against each other and fight. They're actually showing us a bit of the world, and some of them are handling things differently. And as a reader, I like that. I may not have the greatest connection with this stuff because I didn't have a backstory to it, but seeing the story being told, I do enjoy that. And so for me, it's been a positive experience. I think I'm not as hardcore passionate. Oh my God, this is wonderful. Just because I didn't have that, connection going into it on some of this stuff. But positively, I like this. It's been good. I'm curious to see where this goes through. I would like to see some of these worlds survive, but in the end, I'm getting a story. I'm reading it. I'm moving on. So it's, I think I'm enjoying the actual Convergence miniseries more than the tie-ins, though there's a couple tie-ins that I'm absolutely loving. I'm like, I wish they could come back, but those are more of the pre-Flashpoint stuff that I actually read, that I know, that I've read the original stuff. Those characters, I have a much more tie-in. The Flashpoint universe, I have a much stronger tie-in to, because those are the characters that I know. So it's when you go back to the area that I didn't really read, I'm not as emotionally connected to it, but I am enjoying the story.
We've actually seen at least three different versions of the DC universe, because we saw the pre-Flashpoint DC universe, but then we saw the post-crisis DC universe, which was like an earlier version of a lot of these characters, where we got the Detroit Justice League, we got Ollie Queen from the Mike Grell era, different things like that, and then we got the pre-crisis DC. Let me ask you this question, because you're bringing up an interesting point here. I've read all of those eras, and obviously I read characters from all of those eras to varying degrees, based on what my budget was. But those really were eras where I was reading all of DC. So you're right, there is a different experience there, because for me this is visiting old friends, whereas for you there's a learning curve. Did the back page, because I liked the back page because it was like a refresher for me of things I had already read, or filling in the gaps on, okay, I read this story, I didn't read this, I read this story, where I'd read those 2 pages in the back, and it would fill in like a little bit, like there'd be a couple paragraphs that would fill in, oh, I didn't have a chance to ever read that story, but wow, that's a cool way to do all that. Each of these feels like closure, like we're revisiting these characters at a point in time where we as the reader didn't get to see what happened to them. So now we're getting an opportunity to see where their life went, because they were under the dome, so to speak. But it is a sense of progression for them, and I do think like a sense of closure for some of these eras, and an homage. Did you find those pages helpful to you in the books you're mentioning, where there was a character you're like, I don't know this Earth, or I don't know this version of a character? Were those helpful to you? Did they bring you more into the story, or was it still kind of, because I wasn't a part of that era, I don't feel the affinity for that era?
Yeah, you see, exactly. They were helpful, and I was glad they were there, and I enjoyed reading them, because it kind of gives you more bang for your buck. We always say rereadability and just multiple read-throughs and all this stuff. We want to have that pop for our dollar. So I'm like, I was glad that stuff was there because it did kind of fill in. It was my Paul Harvey. The rest of the story filled in some stuff and filled in some gaps. But the emotional connection, it's still really, it wasn't there. Like week one had more of the stuff that I was used to, like seeing Oracle and Nightwing together was like, yay! I was just excited because I love those characters, and some of the characters that were that I've read the that I read the Elseworld stories for, and I knew their backstory. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. That's I like seeing that. That was a good connection. But the back stuff, it helped, but it didn't like give me that emotional because I didn't have that. It's like you can't go home sometimes. You can't go back to when this stuff was coming out. It was good information, and it helped with that kind of stuff. So it helped, free up the blanks and kind of understand, why people were acting certain ways and whatnot.
But you hadn't read it, and you didn't live it at that time, so it wasn't a connection for you. I actually get the point.
Emotional. Right.
Did you find because I mentioned the different eras, obviously week one for you was a lot of connections. So you're probably very excited for this week's issue number 2 books because they are the follow-ups to that week. So there was a lot more, like you mentioned, Nightwing, Oracle, Batgirl, stuff like that are things that you could immediately connect to. What about the post-crisis, like the earlier versions of those characters, meaning that it was, their younger days? You didn't read a lot of that stuff, but was there more of a connection to that because at least was those characters? Or was that still kind of I didn't read this era, so, it's I'm trying to kind of place where everything's at?
Yeah, the post-crisis stuff I had a better connection to because I did read some of that. A lot of it I went back and backstories and trades and whatnot. So I did have more of a when it first came out or second run on it. When it came out, I read some of that stuff. So it's like for me, it's like the Flashpoint had the strongest emotional connection. Era right before that, there was some of that because again, I read some of that. And it's so. There, if I remember reading the story when it first came out, that was something that helped me connect to it now. It's I'm looking right now like the Superboy or the Steel from week 2. Those were stuff that I read some of that stuff when it came out. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I know who Steel is. I know who this suit. I know the jeans jacket wearing kind of little turd that you want to smack around Superboy. I remember that kid. And I remember how he eventually grows into being that, that Con-El that I'm like, man, that's a cool Superboy. That's an awesome character, So it's, you have those just connections where you remember them from that period and you're going back to, oh, that's kind of neat. They pulled them from that point in time.
Yeah, it was funny. It was I was wondering as I was reading them, I'm like, I wonder what Jim's experience is going to be for this because I've read all this material. I knew you read the Death of Superman and Return of Superman, so you knew the multiple characters from that. So I figured you were going to dig that. But for me, the week that was a pure joy and that I was really excited about was the Earth 2 week, the original Earth 2 characters, because I grew up reading all that stuff. The Crisis on Multiple Earths material where we got to see JLA, JSA, the aging heroes, Batman's mantle basically being carried on by his daughter, the Huntress, and Dick Grayson from that era. I wish we had seen more, and I'm glad they showed it in the backup of when Dick Grayson donned a more adult version of the Robin costume. I liked the being torn, though. There's only one Batman. Do I want to take on this mantle? I've developed an identity as Robin. I liked the adult Robin costume when he eventually donned that and stopped donning the amalgam Batman and Robin outfit. But I'm going to be very curious to see issue 2 of that, to see what happens in this, if he feels a need to step up as Batman in this story or not. And I don't know if he needs to, because I really liked him as adult Robin. But I love the idea that this is a sense of progression for these characters. These are those characters that I grew up reading, and I really saw them in crossovers, which was my exposure to them. JLA, JSA crossovers, you talked about bang for the buck. As a kid growing up, I didn't have monthly books where I was reading them, and there were books that were coming out that, like with Giant Size specials and All-Stars, Squadron books, and eventually All-Star Squadron and Infinity Inc. had books going. And I got to read some of that material, but not as much as I would have liked to because I didn't have the budget. to be able to read them. But when I did, I always enjoyed it. And a lot of that stuff was, again, I mentioned many times on the show, as a kid, flea markets. On the weekends, I would go out to, my parents were divorced, and I would go out to Pennsylvania. And my parents, my stepfather and my mom had a trailer out there. And we would always go to, there was a flea market at an old drive-in there. And it was huge. And somebody always had comics in a big box. And they were almost cringeworthy because it was this big box that was like for like $5. I'm talking about a giant box of comics that you could walk out with, but it was beat up stuff. Usually, invariably, it was beat up stuff. So it's really where, for me, the reader in me had to go, these are not bag and borders, but these are stories I haven't read, and I can actually afford to walk out with them. So you'd walk out with big boxes of comics, and in some cases you would have 2 or 3 issues of the same title. And that's what I mean by I'd be reading broken lots of books, but it was a great way for me to get more exposure. And for me, that was a lot of in Marvel and DC books, my way that I got to read characters that, I was a Batman fan, so I read lots of Batman. I loved Justice League. I read lots of Justice League, but if I didn't get to read what was going on with Superman or Aquaman or Wonder Woman or All-Star Squadron, these books, this is where I'd pick up a lot of that material in, those collections or those, dollar super special books that, you get a lot of bang for. So that's those eras. For me, it was revisiting them from my childhood. And these were things that I read either a decent amount of because I'd been lucky enough to get them over time, or I'd at least read broken lots of them, so I was very familiar and had a lot of affinity for the characters. And that was also an era where, I'd get that box, and I didn't have a huge budget. I wasn't reading as much as I was now because I didn't, I'd read there was 2 or 3 titles usually that I was getting a month. That I was consistently getting current monthly. And usually a couple DCs and a Marvel, or a couple Marvels and a DC. It was a rotation based on what my favorites were at the time. It was great to be able to reread and read again. That's where, all that comes from. I'd read usually any of those books, even no matter how beat up they were, I'd read them over and over again. The real kicker, though, is when you'd find one where you really liked the story and it was missing the last couple pages. And usually, they were two-parter stories anyway, so you didn't get that end of it. But that just goes to show that if you like the material and you want more of the lore and want to know more of the universe, that you'll start to become a sponge and seek out whatever you can get your hands on to read more of this stuff. And this has been fun for me, this event. And you're right, I can understand the difference. I was really wondering what that was going to be like for you. I knew week 1 was going to be your week. I knew for week 2 there was going to be broken things because of the things that we'd talked about on the show. But as it progressed on, I was wondering how that was going to go for you. I actually really like that they are not just exploring the main DC universe, but they're also exploring some of the other Earths. And you mentioned Elseworlds. They're doing that as well. They're doing DC 1 Million. I loved seeing the Crime Syndicate issue where they showed the original Crime Syndicate, not the later versions of it, and what they looked like in all of this. And how they were criminals, but they weren't necessarily the I'm going to rip your head off criminals that we saw them become in later years. I like the variation, and I actually like all versions of the Crime Syndicate because there's been multiple versions of them now in the DC universe. I like that they went back to that and showed that era. For me, it was a lot of revisiting. And did you find that after reading the first issue of some of those, you were still excited for the second issue? Or is it still your main interest lies in knowing what happened to the characters that you were attached to? And there's not a right or wrong answer there. I'm just very curious because I don't have that. I can't have that experience, except in a couple of titles. There were actually a few of them where I'm like, I didn't read any of this. I found that interesting, but I understand your point about if I wasn't reading the characters, I didn't really have that affinity. But I enjoyed the story for the story that it was, which was where you went.
To be honest, there were a couple that I'm looking forward to the second issue, even though when I first went into it, I was like, and like you mentioned the Crime Syndicate one, you know, that Crime Syndicate is not the one I know. And I was like, and initially I'm looking at Owlman outfit and I'm like, couldn't they just drop it down a little bit and have it cover his face, you know. And I like the look of the current Owlman version where it's, you know, looks really sleek and cool, and you know, but issue 2 of that series, I really want to see that. I want to see what happens. And like Plastic Man and the Freedom Fighters. Now I know who the Freedom Fighters, but I know the more modern version of them. And I even know the ones that died in the one Crisis. So I was like, okay, I kind of know some, but this early version, the original version of the Freedom Fighters, I really didn't know who they were. And I'm like, okay, and I needed them to show me in their powers or call them by name for me to know who they were. But as that issue went on, I'm like, you know what? I want to see what happens in that universe. I want to see what happens in this Dome universe in that story. So there were some going into this that I had no connection to, but by the end of it, I was like, you know, I want to see issue 2. I want to see how these characters happen, how, you know, what happens to them afterwards.
That Plastic Man and the Freedom Fighters, you're right. That's one where I had some exposure. There was a Freedom Fighters book, and I read a couple issues of those, but I don't have a lot of exposure to them. And there was a crossover where they were involved that, you know, I know them from that. But I didn't really know those characters until, like you, when Palmiotti and Gray started getting a hold of them and doing some cool things with them, I started getting really interested in those characters and want to see more. So it was an interest, especially with Plastic Man. I never read anything with Plastic Man on that group. But that's the Plastic Man I grew up with. So it was funny. For me, the latch point on that book was more Plastic Man. Because I'm like, oh, I grew up with this Plastic Man. And, you know, I mean, I remember him from the comics. I remember the Plastic Man cartoon. With Plastic Man and Baby Plast. Did you watch that as a kid?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I watched that.
Yeah. So, I mean, for that one, my latch-on point for that one, and I don't know if it's the same for you, I think it was more of my childhood memories of Plastic Man that got me into that. More of and I did like you, I loved the modern take on the Freedom Fighters, so I was into it from that. But Plastic Man was my first latch on, and I really liked how that one played out too. I loved the team's reaction to everything. I can't wait to see what happens with Uncle Sam.
Yeah, well, I want to see that, but I also want to see One More Time. You know,
Yes.
that Justice Society one, where they one last time where they're young and they're fighting again. That was something I was like, because that's your era of Justice, you know, JSA.
yeah.
For me, I've read some backstories on them. I kind of knew and I knew the aging superheroes with them in Infinity Inc. But again, it wasn't something I had a strong emotional attachment to. I liked the story. I liked the characters. I liked the aging superheroes, that kind of stuff. But I didn't read it when it first came out. But I tell you, I want to read that issue too, just to see them, see them duke it out one last time, just see them throw down and see what Infinity Inc. can do. And that's a universe that I'm like, man, I wish that universe could survive, because that'd be kind of interesting to see that happen.
Well, what I always loved about that era, you mentioned on the show, and this was quite a while ago, we talked about progression and how you would love a sense of progression and seeing, heroes hand over mantles and things like that. Earth 2, growing up, was a way that they did that. These were the Golden Age heroes, and we got to see their world progress. Batman died in that world. And, I mean, there were real ramifications to that. Superman got married to Lois. Batman had married Catwoman, and they had a child, and that child, and Catwoman died in that world. And they had a child, and Robin progressed and became an adult. And, I mean, we got to see the progression you're talking about. And, you're mentioning Jay Garrick and Alan Scott and Wildcat and all that kind of stuff that was going on. Dr. Fate. That whole issue was a hoorah for me. Seeing them, they're without their powers, their aging process continued because of the fact that they were under the dome, and everything that, their powers did to keep them younger was now subsiding. And they have this one opportunity. And I loved at the end of that issue, this idea that Dr. Fate says, if I can cast this spell, we can do this one more time, but that's it. I mean, this really is the ramification of this. We're going into battle one more time, and this is going to be our last hurrah, our ride into the sunset. It's very spaghetti Western, and I love that about those old characters. There is sometimes where classic can be ageless, and there's something about those Golden Age characters when they rally and hoorah. It doesn't matter that their costumes look a little older. It doesn't matter. It just works. It's an era that retro just kind of seems to be there's a glory to it, if I'm making any sense at all, that it just always worked for me. Even though it's definitely, there's an aging process to it. They come out of a different era. But to me, they always held up better because of there's something classic to it, and it's hard to describe into words. But that issue, the moment you're talking about, was one where I was like, ooh. I liked that it was framed by the Infinity Inc. issue where we got to see the younger generation that was the group that was inheriting, not being quite ready to be the same people. They were still looking to their mentors in hopes that they would somehow be able to step up and solve this crisis. So they weren't quite there yet. And I liked that kind of stereo look at it, if it makes sense. You got to see how a younger generation really isn't quite ready to be those leaders, and they still lean on the JSA for inspiration. But to see the JSA want to step up again was, I don't know, just so cool to me to see how that all played out. I really loved the writing on those, and those are ones I really can't wait for the second issue on, just because I want to see more of those characters.
Yeah, it's been the overarching experience has been, and I like some of this, like Batman and the Outsiders. Now, I know who the Outsiders are, but this era of Batman and the Outsiders, I didn't read. I've read Batman and the Outsiders. I've read these characters. I knew who they were, but I didn't see this version of it. And I think that was kind of interesting because I saw later versions of these characters, later iterations, and post-crisis version of this team together. So seeing this original band together, that was kind of interesting, especially with Metamorpho, just how he got what he wanted. And the Dome, well, life was perfect for him. He was human again. He had his girl. He's like, hey, this is awesome, man. Everyone else is miserable. He's like, why am I mad? Why am I upset? I'm not a toxic waste anymore. I can actually, hold my girlfriend. I can actually have a life. And it was one of those things where I'm reading this whole thing knowing that the Dome's going to drop soon. I'm like, oh, man, I feel bad for this guy. Just because you see him just walking, whistling and having a good old time. Life in the Dome's awesome for him, and sorry, pal, not good.
That was something that I was really digging throughout all this was, the internal conflict he was feeling. Because Spoiler goes through some of that in hers, too, where it's like, they start to develop lives outside of being who they were as superheroes, and they actually like those lives. They actually find a way that those lives work. And I really enjoy seeing that in this where, you get a year passed for them. And for some people, that year was filled with turmoil. I want to get back to my life outside of here. For others, it was acceptance. And, people were going through different phases of the emotional journey on this. For some, it was acceptance. For some, it was deep depression. For some, it was somewhere in the middle. The Metamorpho story, I totally agree with you. That one came out of nowhere. I did read that era of Batman and the Outsiders because it was Batman. So that became, a Batman team book that I followed for quite a few issues. And, especially seeing that team try to deal with all this. Metamorpho especially. It's one of those teams that, I kind of lost somewhere along the way, meaning because of the fact that they're way in the past, that version of the team is way in the past. Revisiting that was reawakening to me. Oh, I remember why I really liked these characters and how cool they were. That's what's been cool with some of these for me too. There's certain things that I really grew up liking. And just because there's been a progression in storytelling and a shift in the company on which characters are the focal point, you start to forget certain characters that you really enjoyed. That was an issue, and I'm so glad you brought it up. For me, it was a reawakening of, I remember why I thought these characters were so cool. I love Geoforce and, kind of seeing that whole team back up again. I miss Looker. Looker was one of the characters that I really liked on that team, and I don't think she's in this group yet in the version that they pulled. But it was great to see them all back together again for that reason. Obviously, I talked to you about the Convergence Hawkman issue and said that that was one that really stood out for me because that was, again, it was the pre-crisis Earth 1 Gotham City, and we got to see the Hawks. This is the tweet version that...
Yeah, this is Shadow War of the Hawks. And it was, I tell you, you know what? For those who, if you haven't listened to episode 1, we go through Shadow War of the Hawks, and I am pretty critical of it. And then I do a revamp. I did a rewatch, a reread of it, and a review of it later on after we've been doing the show. And I'm less critical of it, you know. And so this time going through this round, I'm like, hey, Hawkman! You know, and it was funny because I actually appreciated this era even more now because seeing this story, another story from that era, and there was some cool moments. Again, there was, you know, some issues, and I don't think we didn't have any tweeting. We didn't have him talking to any birds, or in this in the Convergence, so that's kind of cool. But I didn't mind him speaking to birds. I just didn't like him doing the, you know, that type of communication. They still have issues with that, but. You know, I did enjoy the story that was told, and I enjoyed seeing that, and also especially like seeing the Shadow Warriors and the Shadows. You know, just how the people he was fighting throughout, you know, Shadow War the Hawk. I thought that was kind of neat that they pulled them back into the story.
Where'd you see him talking to birds in this one?
That's what I said. I don't think we did see it.
We didn't.
Right.
Yeah, because I was going to say, I adored every moment of this issue. Yeah, you're right. I'm going to get very.
Yeah, I just wanted to
wait, and just so you know,
I don't hate him talking to birds.
Yes,
I hated him the way he had him talking to the birds.
This one I thought was absolutely fantastic. I love that they became a police force in Gotham.
Yeah,
you know, and still fighting even with the dome. I thought that it was really great to see them doing that. I like that Shayera hit a point where she's like, you know what? I'm just going to let it out there. I'm Hawkwoman. This is it. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I actually love the moment. And I love the reaction of people to the revelation of it. It was like I was living vicariously through them when she was revealing it. I love the two of them together. And I wish we could get a book out there that works with them where, you know, it has a wider audience appeal. Because this issue was a great example of what I love about the two of them. I loved their fighting together. I loved the sense of determination. Like, when Hawkman goes into a battle, he keeps fighting. If Shayera's in danger, you better get out of the way. Because this dude's going to find a way to keep coming after you. Oh, yeah. And it was great to see, even in this era, which was a gentler era in comics, he still has that kind of power. As a kid, I didn't read this Hawkman. This was Jeff Johns when he took over JSA and brought them back and did the Kendra Saunders version of Hawkgirl. I got really into her, and then they did the Return of Hawkman story, and they brought all the eras together. Jeff Johns did this really nice tying up of the bow of explaining how the reincarnation made this guy all of them, and they all mattered. I got really into it, and it launched into its own series, and I started reading the older material and collecting it, and I've got a complete collection now of Hawkman, either through showcase volumes or collecting the issues or, you know, any collected editions that were out there. I love the character. I love the different variations of the Space Cop, the Golden Age. I got through some of those archives, those hardcover archives that they had. And I really love the character concept. And I just want to see, I would love to see it work again in a series where somebody really gets it. Especially the reincarnation concept. I just think that so works. But he's also a character. You need this love story. I know in comics, like, there's this weird thing that you can't have them, you know, together, and you can't have them get married, and you can't have all that kind of stuff. With Hawkman, I so completely disagree. It's the relationship with Shayera, the tragic relationship, that I think keeps drawing me in.
Yeah, you know, I'll agree with that. You know, I like the Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Hawkwoman, whatever. You know, whatever term we're going to use for her.
Sure.
I like that relationship. I like seeing that. And you know, the morbid part of me is like, if they introduce a Hawkman and a Hawkgirl, you know she's going to die eventually. When's it going to happen? Or is she? Are they going to do a swerve? Because they had the one where Hawkman died and Hawkgirl continued on. So, you know, one of them is going to meet a tragic end eventually. And I think it's that love story. It's that thing. And then it's that pending doom that's sitting out there that, for me, I kind of enjoy. Now, I never wanted to see it happen because I do like relationships within the heroes, and I like seeing that type of stuff and just going forward, again, the progression of the characters. But with those two characters, I always have that. Now, me personally, I always lean towards the Space Cop and Aliens. I kind of like that over the reincarnations. But when you look at the love story side of it, the reincarnation version is kind of neat that in every generation they always find each other, they always come together, and it's that there is that is a cool aspect of these characters. But for some reason I always connect more, I think, to the space cop and just the alien, that they're from, Thanagar, and they are, aliens, and it's I kind of like that a little bit better for me. But I can appreciate and I enjoy the other sides of it too. So he's a character that I wouldn't mind seeing, more of it, and the two of them together. And if they use Convergence to pull this era or a version of it, they could use this event to maybe pull something into it. That would be kind of interesting.
I love their use of weapons. I like how they have their blades and different things like that. But then I love how, they'll pick up things and all of a sudden they instantly become a weapon because they're that kind of warrior. And it's just a distinction between them. I like there's something a little bit rougher around the edges with them. But yet there's a code and there's an honor to them, too, when it's done right. And there's something about that I love. But I like sometimes the sense of I think where I like the reincarnation is a sense of longevity. And it doesn't matter to me if they're space cop or not, because if you go on reincarnation, it's really all of it. So, yeah. And see, that's the part I really like, because I like the Earth archaeologist meets space cop meets, and all that working. I think it just works because it opens up different kinds of storytelling opportunities. You can have them based on Earth for a while. Then you can have them do space epics, and you can do all that kind of stuff. And I think it works really well with the characters when done right. You really need writers that understand it. And the sad part is nowadays, it drives me nuts because we're in a digital era where it's, I think, easier to get the word out, but yet for some reason, comics haven't found a way to tap into a new market. I think it's a problem, and I think it faces all of comics, not just the big two. It's great material. The price point is sometimes, I think, prohibitive for a new reader to come on board, and I wish there was ways to get free material into a larger audience's hands rather than shuffling around the current comic fans, if that makes sense. Because it really is upon us, and I think there is an important responsibility for us if we love this material to be the ambassadors. We have to get the word out because comic companies are having trouble getting the word out. I think the films do well to, get people aware of material. And I do think, I'm assuming those films do have an impact on, and games have an impact on getting readers to try out some of the material. But I don't think it's the same impact as a current reader has if they understand their friends who are potential comic readers. So I think, there has to be a way to kind of, for us to be the ambassadors to kind of get the word out. And I talk about it when I talk about books like Hawkman in particular, because there's a lot of unique characters out there. I almost wanted to say oddball, but and there's that, there's that part too. People like quirky, unusual, interesting new things. And a lot of times it seems like, comics are very homogenized to certain top tier characters, but a lot of this material is very accessible to new readers. And you have to know your friends and who they are and get some of this stuff in their hands. This Hawkman stuff, though, I adore. Yeah. I do geek out over it. I geeked out over this issue. It doesn't matter what era of Hawkman it is when it's done right. And this is one that was done right. And that's a key. It's the writers have got to do a story that just happens to be done right. It feels right. It feels ageless, even though it clearly was from a different era. I actually forget who did the writing on this one. I want to take a look at it. That's Jeff Parker. I'm not surprised because I'm loving his work right now. He's the one doing Aquaman, or has been doing Aquaman. I think there's a new writer on Aquaman after this. But and Tim Truman's pencils, the artwork is just spectacular on that. I love Tim Truman stuff. So I think this just had the right marriage of great artwork and a great classic story that just worked. Did it feel aged to you? Because obviously I'm biased. I'll admit I have a Hawkman bias. Big shock. But for you, did it feel aged to you or did it feel current and contemporary? How did that work out for you?
It was weird because the look of the book, and I want to give full compliments on the art team, it felt like I was rereading Shadow War of the Hawk. It had that same look to it. Mm-hmm. But the story that was telling, because that was one of the issues I had back when we first reviewed it. I was like, I don't know about, I was like, I don't know about. But when I was reading it this time, I felt like I was reading that exact same era, but I wasn't I didn't sit there going, okay, this is obviously written in the 70s or written in the whatever,
80s, 80s.
you know. So it did feel contemporary, but they weren't trying to make it like the modern Hawkman and Hawkwoman. It was taking place in that time period, so it was respectful and consistent with the way the stories were told back then, but it didn't seem like they just pulled an old issue out and then reprinted it. But it had that same look and feel to me. So I'm giving full compliments on our team and creative team that they captured the essence of what was back then, but they didn't lock it in so you're telling a story just like they were told back then. So it's a modern feel. It's a modern feel to a classic story, and I think a lot of these issues had that kind of feel to it. Like, especially going through the different eras of Superman, I thought they really captured what the look was back then, what the story, how the characters were reacting back then. And, and I'm reading these issues that I never read the stuff before. And I'm getting this feeling, okay, this is probably what it felt like to read pre-crisis Superman with pre-crisis, Supergirl. Okay, this is probably what it felt like to read, the Earth 2 heroes, or read the, and it kind of like, it took me to a spot where I didn't really have the solid memory of it, but I was able to say this is because it felt different, but it was still a good, solid story. I'm making sense. I'm not sure.
No, you are. Okay. Actually, you're nailing it, because it's a balance, and it's a tricky balance, because what you want to do is you want it to feel inviting and familiar to readers who read that era, while at the same time you don't want it to feel dated to a newer reader who maybe this is their, because for a lot of these you were a newer reader. Maybe like Shadow Wars, one that we read together and we did on the show, and you've read multiple times, because like you said, you did that review and follow up on it where you had a very different feeling about it. But for me, I loved this stuff. You're right. The dialogue never felt dated. It felt very current and contemporary, yet at the same time, they had all the right beats, the classic beats of these characters. This book, I firmly feel this book would work today. I do. Just because of what you're saying. The art's gorgeous. It's a great style. The story, though, is not, it feels current. Like, everything that they were dealing with was very current to what was going on in the Dome, and it evolved them. There was a sense of progression from them, and it felt contemporary. I would actually love to see them be a fish out of water in our current world, and see how they would deal with what that looks like. I don't know how this event's going to end, and who's, if anybody, aside from the current Earth 2 characters, are going to be coming back after this. I hope somebody does, because there's so many of these eras with the neat, unique characters that I would love to see some of it at least dropped into our world.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking we're going to get multiple cities from the different eras that are going to somehow make it through, or maybe Planet Telos will be where these people are on. You think back to the old Green Lantern Mosaic series, where they had the multiple races and it was the patchwork of different societies. I'm wondering if we're going to have that type of thing going on this planet when the story is done. And maybe that's what, you think Earth 2 society is going to be. Maybe it's this society that's a whole new beginning for all these different people. And maybe we'll have different eras, different heroes on this planet interacting and having to deal with each other. I think that, for me, would be kind of a neat story, to have this giant mosaic of all these different times still around. Because you could, take a series, a week, 4 or 5 issues on one city, then 4 or 5 issues on this city, and you could really just, let different creative teams go at it, and you can kind of have fun with what was the past is still present, and then them dealing with other people. I think they got a really solid something they could do with this beyond.
Well, especially if they're not separated. I mean, by like a dome or something like that.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how they keep peaceful interact. Like, I would read that book. Like, what you're laying out there would be a great monthly book. Because you could have different creative teams following plot point, like where they could do like a, almost like an anthology style, not anthology. I mean, I guess a rotating
anthology style.
Yeah, but it would be fun to have like a rotating, like your main story. It's just a main story for 5 issues, if that makes sense, following a certain group. But there being continuing threads of the political nightmare that this would be, because you're really dealing with people with different ideologies and different backgrounds and stuff like that. I would love to see how that works out. I don't think that's where this is going, but I would read that book in an instant. It'd be fun to see all of these eras trying to, like, we're still living here, and our neighbors are like Gotham 2.0. I mean,
we got
Metropolis.
Red Sun. We got Red Sun Superman on one side. We got pre-crisis Superman on the other side. What's going to happen here?
Right.
Yeah, stuff like, I think that would be, for me, would be something I'd like. And I agree with you. I don't think they're going to do that. I think this is just kind of a story that eventually it's going to end and we'll get something else. But I personally, that's what I would like to see happen. Now, there is something that it's kind of bothering me, and hopefully maybe you can help me sort through this. When the dome is up, tech powers and technology and stuff like that got shut down. But sometimes you'd get certain things that wouldn't completely drop, especially on the technology side. Like we talked about the Hawks. They were still flying. Now, I always took it that nth metal was the reason they're able to fly. It's not just the wings. Or is it just the wings?
Well, in this era, that's a good question.
Yeah, and like some of the armor people were working. Some of it wasn't working, like Cyborg. Some of his stuff wasn't working. In the one title it wasn't working, but in the other title it was. And I'm like, one title had parts of him. It was, like his body was failing, but the others, didn't have those issues. And like Martian Manhunter was another one. In the one title, he was in human form when the dome went up, so he's strapped.
Right.
Another one, he wasn't in human form, so he had some of his powers. Same thing with Aquaman. He had his strength, because that's natural for him, but he didn't have the communication. But, Wonder Woman didn't have her strength. But to me, that's always natural for the Amazon because, and again, it was like stuff like that where I was like, they let you know what they could do early on. So I wasn't lost, but I was just, sometimes I had issue following when it would work, when it wouldn't work.
Well, like the Thanagarian technology for the wings.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back on that one. I don't remember if that was nth metal back then or if it was just Thanagarian technology.
Alien tech.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd have to go back and read that era because it worked differently in different eras of Hawkman, and I don't think that was completely reliant on nth metal.
Okay.
I'd have to go back and I'd have to check because it really is depending on different eras. But obviously that tech still worked in this, and we had Batmobiles that still worked, for example. Yeah,
we had Batmobiles, and so the tech kind of worked, but then like Arsenal's arm didn't work.
Cyborg didn't work.
Yeah, well, but the one Cyborg did work though.
Mm-hmm.
We had the one the Titans, and then we had the new Teen Titans, and the one worked, but the other one wasn't, and his body is slowly dying, and that was a cool story for me. I was like, man, that's kind of neat how the fact that his cybernetics weren't working, and he's mostly cybernetic, so he's going to have some issues here, and I like seeing that, but. And then sometimes it was working fine. And so it was like, I was trying to figure out when, it would work, when it wouldn't work. Like Cyborg Superman, again, it's the alien technology, so maybe, but, I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to see a rules set. Like, I would love to know, which is what you're really asking for. Yeah. Like, what is a clean set of rules as far as when things work and when things don't?
Yeah, and let me clarify something, just so anybody know. I'm not, this never took me out of the story. Never made me say, "Oh, that's," because the writing team, the creative team, was really quick to let you know at the beginning of the story what they could do, and they told it within the story. They told it within the confines of things happening, and like I love I can't remember which one it was, but no, it was Action Comics, I think, when Power Girl lost her powers and she fell through the skyline and she's got all the scars on her back because she no longer had the Kryptonian stuff, and they showed that right away. And then in another version they showed where it was the powers slowly drained away and it wasn't a quick thing. So I like the fact that they showed, okay, here's this one, here's that one, but in the end you don't have your powers. So, but how they got there, they told it in the story, especially that one Power Girl where they showed her when she's in the shower and she's getting out and she sees all the scars on her back, and it's kind of a little thing for her that she's like, man, I gotta go to the dentist now. I don't like this. I'm putting on weight. I don't have my Kryptonian metabolism anymore. I like those little nuances they put in that story. And it was all part of one telling us how they lost their power, how they are, but also telling us how they're getting by in this current world. I thought those were some really cool stuff they put in it.
You know what, dude? I'm looking at the new Teen Titans issue. We don't see Cyborg up and running prior with the dome up.
Okay.
Because that issue, very early on in that issue, it starts to drop down. But he was having issues in that. If you take a look at it, he's not as much of a cyborg as ours is.
Okay.
But Gar makes this point. Because Donna asks Gar, how's Vic? Bad, worse than bad. The promethium that powers him may be constantly regenerating, but the cells that hold it, they're deteriorating, and Star Labs doesn't have the parts to replace them. So he was having that issue with parts and things. I didn't get the idea, there was nothing Donna was saying in the beginning to validate your point, that Vic is out of commission, because she was sending that letter to Terry, her husband, at the time. So I think you're right. I don't think he was down and out like the other Cyborg was in the Titans book. But, man, I love the distinction between them. Because he wouldn't be quite the cyborg that he was in Titans.
Right.
He evolved over time and became more and more robotic. I mean, more and more of his parts got replaced, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, as the eras went on. I actually quite liked that they did the different eras of the Titans, the two different eras, because there's two distinct differences to the group, the way that they operated, and their overall mental state. And I was glad that they showed both. And I was glad to see the whole Arsenal storyline brought back in.
Hey, that Arsenal storyline is still one of, just everything that character has gone through. I really dig that, from going through the early stuff with Speedy as the junkie and fighting through that. Then he loses his daughter, which it was terrible that a little girl died. But come on, man, that story was awesome.
Well, and it's a redemption. It's a redemption story.
Yeah.
And that stuff, I always love redemption stories, and that stuff was neat. I don't know, I've really, Swamp Thing, I enjoyed that quite a bit, to kind of see that era of Swamp Thing, because I didn't read a lot of that era. A lot of my love for Swamp Thing has come from the Scott Snyder stuff, because that was the first time that I'd read a lot of broken Swamp Thing over the years. Read some Alan Moore stuff that I got into, but a lot more of it I got into, a lot of the past Swamp Thing I got into because of how good the Snyder series was, continuing on to Charles Soule, who wrote it, and I'm very sad to see that series go, because I've become a big Swamp Thing fan, and how much I enjoyed the Swamp Thing issue, even though it was a different Swamp Thing. It was an earlier era of Swamp Thing. I want to know more of Swamp Thing. I've got my bug now for Swamp Thing. I'm going to start seeking out more of the older material to read. The Len Wein and Alan. I've got some of the Len Wein stuff, and I've got some of the Alan Moore stuff, and I've been reading some of it. It's just one of those things where now it's being bumped higher up the back issue stack that I would like to read because I'm so into the character. This has been a nice mix. Matrix, Supergirl Matrix. Did you like reading her again?
Well, I didn't really read her that much.
Okay.
She was around with the death of Superman, but I didn't read the monthly Supergirl Matrix back then. I only read her when she had the direct tie-in into the actual death story or the return of the Superman story. So I really didn't know any of her backstory or even that version of Lex that well. It's weird. I didn't have a lot of, I had a understanding of who he was and everything with the clone and yada yada, everything that he came through and the whole story of what happened to him, etc. But again, I didn't have a good solid base of it, so that was a weird story for me to read. Just the constant bickering and just how snarky he was towards her. Like, was that normal in the monthly series, or was that something that got escalated under the dome?
The monthly moved beyond that. This is really almost pre the monthly, because the monthly was Peter David's series, and he took her kind of beyond all this. It was afterwards. This really is the Death and Return of Superman era, because this matches the Superboy issue that you read.
Yeah.
So it's slightly after that. This is when like she starts to begin questioning Lex and that relationship. But early on, she was like Lex's drone, almost. That over time, that gradually started to change for her as things went on. And the Peter David series is one of those. I don't always hear people bring it up and mention it, but it's Peter David, and anybody who knows Peter David's work should be kind of nodding, oh, I probably should read that. And yes, you should. It was the Supergirl Matrix series was really, really good. Peter took her beyond this from these roots and made her a very interesting and unique character. So this was interesting to read. It almost read like a prequel to a lot of that for me, because it told a Supergirl that hadn't quite evolved into the Supergirl that we read in that book from Peter David. So no, to answer your question, no, she had eventually broken off completely from Lex.
Oh, okay.
And this predates a lot of that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The Booster Gold one, the Booster Gold issue, I absolutely love that issue.
Oh,
that was because that was another one where that had a lot of the booster I was familiar with. It had boosters from other tie-ins. That for me was a great Booster Gold issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and what was nice about that is it follows up from the Future's End Booster Gold issue. So if you read that one, this was like a direct continuation of everything that went on there. But then, we've got also that Flashpoint, where you've got Flashpoints bleeding into a lot of these books, the robotic versions of the Justice League and stuff, that happened in that dark, distant future. It was great to see how the Future's End story wasn't just a throwaway, and it's a part of this as well. I'm going to be very curious to see, and we do know we're getting a book, a Batman Beyond book featuring the Batman Beyond that comes out of Future's End. So
okay.
That's going to be
so. The Future's End universe is going to continue.
I'm guessing. I know it's that Batman Beyond from Future's End that's who it's going to be.
Cool. Again, I kind of like that. I want to. It's weird to be happy because the bad guy won, but it does give you an interesting story because the bad guy won, and the heroes are the resistance movement. It's it's the Terminators type storyline where the heroes got their back up against the wall and they got to knuckle up and they got to start doing some fighting back against insurmountable odds, and those make the great story. So I'm happy that that's still alive.
Did you read the Parallax stuff when Hal was Parallax? Did you read any of that? I know we did a lot of when we were reading the John stuff. They revisited a lot of that, and there was the redemption in Rebirth of Hal. But did you go back and read when Hal fell and how that all went?
Not completely.
Okay.
I was very spotchy and patchy in that. I think I'm trying to remember when.
I think you just invented a new word.
What?
Spotchy.
Spotchy. That's a word?
It is? What does spotchy mean?
I don't know. It's a word.
I don't think that's a word. I think you just invented a new word.
All right.
Spotchy.
I'm good at that. But
I don't think that word.
Spotty and patchy together. Spotchy.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Urban Dictionary. Spotchy. Well, okay, there actually is a definition in the Urban Dictionary of spotchy. It's flicking a paintbrush against a canvas with paint. The canvas becomes or looks spotchy. Or I'm not going to read the rest of it because it's foul. But yeah, there's more too spotchy. None of it is what you said. Well, you've invented your own. You've invented your own. There's the Sensei dictionary version of spotchy, apparently. Yeah. Wow. Spotchy.
I gotta look this up.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I know you just looked it up. Your understanding of the word spotchy is a little spotchy.
That's not the definition I was going. I think maybe that's a word I'm going to remove from my vocabulary because yeah.
Whoops. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hal's understanding of being a hero is a little spotchy, like your understanding of spotchy. It's
yeah. I know enough from the Parallax time, and I know enough from that era that the Parallax issue, I was comfortable with it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, bringing back Parallax. And that was the intro of Kyle and all that stuff. I think I was more comfortable with that version of the Green Lantern than week 4, that Green Lantern version, because everybody, even Jon Stewart in that version, I was like, this doesn't seem like the confident Marine that I know. That I'm comfortable with. And this was more of the annoying Guy Gardner than the Guy Gardner that I think is actually pretty cool. And even Hal was a bit on the weird side. So it's kind of weird, for me with the one Green Lantern version and then the other Green Lantern Parallax version, seeing how the heroes were reacting. And again, it's different eras, and it's. And I don't want to say bad things about, but it was a different hero and they're coming from different places. And I think I read more of the one than the other. So I was kind of confused a little bit when
that was pre-Crisis. So,
yeah.
For you, that was an era you didn't read of Green Lantern. Yeah. Whereas I read that stuff. I was reading Green Lantern during that time. And when Jon Stewart took over, and I read that era with Guy Gardner where Hal had to step back up. Like everything they showed in the back, I read all that. Gerard Jones was doing the writing back then, I believe. And anyone, if you're throwing your iPods against the wall, I apologize. I'm trying to pull this off the top of my head. But I believe that's who was writing Green Lantern back then. And I enjoyed that quite a bit. At least some of the stories that were referenced in the back. But Green Lantern was one of those characters. My history with Green Lantern was I always thought the character was super cool. I read arcs and, decent sized runs of it, but then I had to step off because I couldn't afford it. And that was really, there was another character I was interested in. I wanted to read, for lack of a better word, more. And that was always hard and that's always been my experience with comics. I've never dropped a book because of quality. I've dropped a book because of budget. And it's always been I've had to go with, well, this one slightly edges out that one. Never being 100% comfortable with the decision to drop something because I was always enjoying what I read. So a lot of how I read comics now is exactly how I've always read comics my entire life. The difference now tends to be more time that drives my not picking up a title than finances, because I could read a lot more than I do right now. I just don't have the time to read more than I do right now. So I'm lucky on that end that I can get the books that I want now. The problem is I can't, with rereading and enjoying titles, because I really am focused on enjoyment. I want to really enjoy my books. I grab titles that I know I'm going to enjoy. Even the ones we do on the show. Like, I don't feel like I'm picking them up just for the podcast. I would have zero issues saying, you know what, I'm not reading these 3 books anymore because I'm just not interested. Because I think people listening would be interested in hearing that. So there's a legitimacy to that. Or even that I'm still picking them up just for the show, because I wouldn't hesitate saying that either. Like, these are 3 titles that honestly, if I wasn't doing this podcast, I'd drop. You've shared that many times.
Yeah.
Where there's been books that you're like, I'm picking it up because of the show. And it's not that I hate it. It's just kind of I'm picking it up because we're a comprehensive DC podcast and I'm reading these. And I would gladly say that as well. But to me, the bigger problem I have now is time as an opportunity cost than finances. Because do you find there's more books that you want to read that you would love to get that you just don't have the time to read?
Oh God, yeah! I'd love to jump back into Marvel Universe.
I would too.
There's some cool stuff going on over there, but I don't have the time. I don't have the space. It's funny. I've got a house with multiple bedrooms that really are just one's just a box room where it's just got a bunch of boxes. If I emptied it out, I could turn it into this immaculate vault room, but I still haven't gotten around to emptying the room out. But eventually I'm going to, but even that, I'm going to run out of space and, budget financially, but also time-wise, because that's, there's times when I'm like, man, I look at my stack of comics that are rising, man, I got to start jumping. I'll spend an evening just reading comics, just going through and just doing multiple read throughs and doing just going through it and just it's kind of like, okay, time to go to work. I got to attack this comic book stack, and but while I'm doing that, the TV shows that I'm recording are stacking up in my DVR, or I've got to go to work, or my folks need something or something like that. I need like 30 hours in a day.
Does that bother you? Does it do you find that you're bothered by the stockpiling of things? Does that bother you?
It personally annoys me when I stockpile, and it's stockpiling anything, like stockpiling stuff in my DVR on my TV for TV shows, or stockpiling comics, or just regular books that I'd like to read, or I've got trades. I'll pick up.
I like that, regular books.
Yeah. Novels,
I know what you're talking about. Books. Yes, of course.
Book books.
Yes, right.
Yeah. I've got
the dirty splotchy books. It's like
and it
or
does
spotchy,
annoy me
I'm
that
sorry.
I have those things. And I gotta attack them, and I gotta figure out, okay, I'm going to do this. And it's weird because sometimes I'll have like just brain dead TV, and I'll catch myself watching it, and I'm like, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm just killing time, and I gotta stop myself. Like, okay, stop watching this. Either watch something you want to watch, or go upstairs and read, or clean your house, or do yard work. And I gotta actually physically force myself from stopping the brain dead stuff and actually do something productive in my life.
I used to find this, and actually there were eras during our podcast recording where this really used to bother me, what you're talking about right now. And I've gotten like a moment of zen, I think, from all of this. I've started realizing that instead of getting upset about the stockpile, because, I'm a big film fan. I love movies, and very similar to my comic taste, for anybody listening to this, you're kind of like, well, you like everything. I have very diverse tastes. So it extends. It's not just in comics. It's in novels. It's in movies. So everything you're talking about, I'm just like nodding. And I'm like, there's so many TV shows I want to jump on that I don't have time to. There's so many movies that I want to watch that I don't have time to. I found that I look for a balance. Video games. I'm a big video game fan. Every bit as much of a fan of comics I am. I love video games. I grew up, in the Pong, when Pong hit. We had Pong at home. Loved that stuff. Way through the Atari 2600. I had friends of mine who had Intellivision, ColecoVision. My friend Jimmy Bradick and I were talking about just the other day, Commodore 64. We used to play. There was a wrestling game on that where it was, I don't know if you remember this. It was like Macho Man Randy Savage versus DiBiase, and you could buy add-on discs that had like two other wrestlers, but they had commentary on it. And what it was like you were watching videos that you could control, sort of, where if you pushed the button first, your guy would do the move, if it makes sense.
Yeah.
And there was commentary from including Bruno Sammartino. And partway through, he'd during the commentary, he'd go, hang on, I've got to go get some Bromo seltzer. And he'd vanish. So you'd keep wrestling, and you'd have the other guy commentating, but Bruno would be gone. And they had more than one commentary team, depending on which disc that you had. But it was fascinating that back then they were experimenting with things like, let's, really try to add realism to these games that don't have it. So I've loved video games all the way through. And the more story-driven that they got, the more I got drawn into them. I love role-playing games because of the fact that there's big, intensive stories. But the problem with those big, intense, almost serialized stories in role-playing games is they take a lot of hours. So I stockpile games. There's great games that I love. I've got right now a PlayStation 3 and a PlayStation 4. And there's just a wealth of games that I want to play. And, I just gotten very content with, what, I'm playing this game right now. I'm enjoying it. I want to complete it, get to the end. And, hopefully I'll get to all the games that I want to play. But, there's that pesky thing called work.
Yeah.
No, and I love my job. So I say that jokingly. I love what I do. And I bring a lot of work home with me as well. So I have to, obviously that's my priority, is my job and my career, which I love. I've learned to be happy that I'm never bored. There's always a great game that I want to play. And I have found that putting that in and just enjoying that experience and diving into the one, like, okay, I've got these 5 games that are on my most want to play at the moment list. I'm not going to be able to play all 5 of them. I want to play this one right now. I put that in. I really enjoy that experience. I'm glad to enjoy that experience and just content with the fact that, you know what, I've got certain games that I have that I'm hoping I'm going to get to at some point. I've become more judicious on what I buy game-wise because of that. Because I know, okay, I had a period where I was like buying too many and they're stockpiling. And I'm like, okay, I'm overwhelming myself. Let me just get more selective. So I buy the ones that are like on my top of my list. And even in that case, I can't get to them all. I'm just happy that I've always got something that I want to play. And I focus on that and just enjoy the experience. Film, it's the same thing. I've got movies that I want to watch. Some of them I'm probably never going to get to. We've had days where there were snow days that we had this school year where my wife and I were both home, and we did a couple movie marathons. And it was fun because, you know, I've got very diverse movie tastes. So you'd watch a sci-fi action thriller, then you'd go to a romantic comedy, and then you'd go to – and I enjoyed that experience. But, you know, it's frustrating that there's things that I want to watch that I can't get to. I started watching Marvel's Daredevil on Netflix, which is brilliant, by the way. I haven't made my way through all of that yet. I just haven't had time because, you know, I'm watching Powers, too, which is on the PlayStation Network, and that's another great superhero show. But here, we went through this drought where there was, like, if you were lucky, you had one good superhero show on television. Now, there's too many good ones. That's great. My sadness right now is they canceled Constantine. They officially canceled it, and hopefully there's rumors that maybe it'll get picked up by one of the, you know, online networks or something like that. I'm praying that's the case because I love that show. That's my worry now, not that there's too many. Because I think the Marvel stuff is great. I'm behind on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I like it a lot. You know, it's more, I'm more of an Arrow fan. I'm more of a Flash fan, which is why those tend to get prioritized. And it's really not because we just do this podcast. I just am. But I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is great. And I'm just probably people listening to this going, that's my favorite show. And I'm like, I get it. It's great. The quality's awesome. So we're in a really good era where there's too much stuff for us. And I'm happy with that. I'd rather have too much and not be able to get to it, because what I'm finding is with each of those experiences I mentioned, I'm always picking up and spending time with something that I'm thoroughly enjoying. There's nothing where it's like I'm a drone and like making my way through it. I did find when I was getting overwhelmed by it, and you're not where was at with it. I was getting to the point where I was forcing myself to do certain things. Like, if I was more in the mood to watch a movie, I was forcing myself to read comics to try and get down my stockpile. So what happened was I started resenting my comic reading. Or if I was watching movies because I wanted to get caught up on movies, I found that I wasn't enjoying the movie and I was missing out on some reading that I wanted to do at that time. Now what I've just found is I'm just going to be content doing what I want to do at that moment when I have free time. Because you're like me, where we got very busy work schedules. A lot of people listening to this are in that same boat. You got busy work schedules. Our free time to be able to do things that are hobby related is more and more limited. And that happens as you get older. But, you know, there's also family things going on and stuff like that gets in that. I've just found that, you know what, I kind of, when it comes to my hobby time, I go where my head wants to go at that moment and just enjoy the moment and don't worry about the fact that I got extra stuff. I pay attention to it in the sense that it helps drive the purchases I make. So if I've got like a huge stockpile of this, I maybe purchase less of it just because of the fact that, you know, I'm more selective of the things that I get. But I've found that I have increased. I genuinely enjoy every one of those hobbies now in a way that I probably haven't in the past decade. Because I've just kind of learned to chill out and go, it's a good problem to have. I mean, you know what I mean? As opposed to a drought where none of that stuff is around. I like that there's too much. I like that maybe I'm reading and loving something that somebody else is going, you know what, that's not for me. But there's something there for them. And I'm more worried about any of those hobbies going away than I am the overabundance of material.
Well, I'm always worried about comic books going away.
Yeah.
You know, because it's every year the numbers drop and drop and drop. And I've got friends at work who are fans of the medium who've never read a comic book in their life. And they won't read a comic book. And even if I were to suggest them, a comic book, they wouldn't read it just because they don't want to the monthly buying. It's just there's a lot of different reasons why. Like nah, because I had the one guy who was into the stuff. I'm like, hey dude, if you want to bring in some stuff and you can just borrow it and read it. He's like, nah, and it's okay. He doesn't want to. He enjoys the medium and he enjoys all the movies, but he doesn't want to actually go into the comic book. And
there's still that perception that it's a nerdy medium.
Yeah. Oh, big time.
And I think it's lessened. It's broken down. I think when you go to like you were just at a Wizard Con, I've noticed the diversity of the crowd has increased. Everybody gets along. Like there's people from every walk of life. There's people who are very casual fans to people that are hardcore fans that are there. But everybody seems to get along at the cons, and I love that aspect of it. And I think the reason why you're seeing more cons sprout up is because this pop culture material's bled over into so many different mediums that it has increased a fan base. But it is still one of those things that, and the perception of comics being this nerdy like medium is something that we still struggle to break down. It's literature. It's another form of literature. And like all literature, it has different levels, different reading levels. It has different levels of depth. I watch television programs with the same diversity that I read comics. Sometimes I like to just read a funny television show. Sometimes I like to just read a funny book. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's not diminishing of either. I think humor is easy to enjoy, easy to jump on, yet compelling is hard to do. And I think that in both mediums, you get certain things that do it well and certain things not so good, where it feels watered down. But it's always good when I see people that are able to do, what I guess would be what the equivalent of all ages material is. But I feel like that terminology is oversimplified a lot of times. But I love that kind of material. I love reading and watching something. Sometimes it's just fun. It's just an enjoyable experience. Other times I wanted to get in something that's like creepy and shocking and thought provoking and makes me scratch my head. And something that will downright confuse me, like Morrison. And I actually I read the second issue of Multiversity. I'm so glad that series didn't end where I thought it was. I had a rant a few episodes ago on the show where I said I didn't understand the ending of Multiversity. Well, that's because I didn't understand that wasn't the ending. There was a Multiversity issue 2, and if you read Multiversity issue 2, and I'll probably on the next episode do a little bit more of a rant on it, but if you read issue number 2, boy, does that clear things up, and it's a great ending to it. It's I really wish I had known. I was under the mindset that Multiversity was ending before Convergence. Because my impression was that this month, I didn't realize there was going to be a Batman issue, a Superman issue. I thought this month was a complete break.
Yeah.
This first month of Convergence. So I didn't realize we were going to be getting some of these other things. And that's where I got confused. So Multiversity was my perception of the ending of Multiversity was a victim of that versus quality of storytelling. Boy, I am so glad that I read issue number 2 because now I feel like I completely understand Multiversity. What a great event that was. I would say to anybody out there that's reading Multiversity, if you haven't gotten to the end of it and you're kind of head scratching along the way, read it all the way through. Once you get to issue number 2, it all comes together and you're kind of like, oh, wow, that's cool what he just did. Which is a very Grant Morrison thing to do. So I do want to correct myself, and I want to thank some of our listeners chimed in either on forums, on the Facebook group, I should say, or directly onto our website, and just kind of like corrected me that, no, dude, there's another issue coming of this. And I really appreciate them pointing that out because I was really anticipating that second issue. And once I read it, I was like, wow, thank goodness. Because I think the head scratcher for me was I thought that was the ending. I was like, huh? and it's because it wasn't the end. I was assuming the television show ended before it did. So it's good stuff. It's good material. Let's talk about, if we could, Divergence a little bit, and then we'll go back to Convergence to talk about the main series. And I suspect as we talk about the main series, we'll probably talk more about these tie-ins as well. But I do want to talk about the Divergence issue because so much happened in that. We've got the Batman story, The Rookie, which is Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Danny Mickey, FCO Placencia, Steve Wands, Matt Humphreys, and Mark Doyle. We got Superman Exposed, which is Gene Luen Yang, and I'm butchering that name. It's Luenyang. Apologies, because I really enjoyed the story. John Romita Jr., Claus Jansen, Scott Hanna, Hi-Fi, Travis Lanham, Ricky Purdon, and Eddie Berganza. Justice League, the Darkseid Prologue 2, The Other Amazon, Jeff Johns, Jason Fabak, Brad Anderson, Rob Lay, Amadeo it's Turturro. Apologies there. And Brian Cunningham. And Batman, of course, is created by Bob Kane. Superman created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family. And one of the things that we had a listener that actually sent me a question, because you and I read these from the cover credits, and we've been adding in the bit that now the comics have started to, and some of them, acknowledging the original creator of the character or creators of the character. But the thing came up about Bill Finger. Have you guys ever thought of announcing Bill Finger? We read those straight from the book. It's very interesting because I've got actually a book about Bill Finger that I've been reading and enjoying, and his contributions to to the creation of Batman and so much of the lore that we know and love. And actually, let me get the name of the book real quick because I just want to shout it out. It's an all ages book, and I actually got it from my classroom. Hang on one second. It's actually Bill the Boy Wonder, and it's by Mark Tyler Nobleman. Remember we had him on the show for the Siegel and Schuster book? It's an all-ages storybook, but it really is all ages because I read it and got a lot out of it. It goes through the history of Bill Finger and his role in the Batman lore and what he did. And I recommend the book highly. We never intend on this show to slight anybody. I think throughout the history of the Batman universe, there's so many creators that really should be acknowledged for adding to the mythos of Batman that we read and know and love now, that there should be winks and a nod to. I do give them credit for the arrangements that they've created in order to start acknowledging some of, people like Bob Kane and Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and what they did with the families. I think there comes a point where, that list probably should be multiple pages of listing that, but I don't know what the appropriate way to do that is for a comic company to acknowledge the people that have touched on a character and have added something to the lore. I do suspect if you start doing that, you're going to start leaving out more and more people that really should be acknowledged, not just for the original creation of the character, but for their contributions to the depth of the history and the lore of these characters, because they're serialized. So many people have changed and evolved and adapted them. So we read them from the credits. It's never meant to be a slight of people like Bill Finger, and I'm glad I actually mentioned it. That's why I want to acknowledge it on the show. Our intention is never to slight that. It's just the opposite. Actually, I feel that there's so many people that have touched on the history of these characters. We read the cover credits whenever we feel like we're going to be talking about a whole issue, mainly just because we want to start increasing awareness of the creators. It's something that I've really come to enjoy when I read a book. When I'm done, I like to go back and look at who the creative team was, who the writer was, who the artist was. I like an awareness. I try to find out colorists and inkers and try to notice things about that. I have zero artistic talent, so a lot of times the separation between a penciler and an inker and a colorist, obviously you can notice a little bit more just because it's the color portion of it, but that relationship between that team, I'm not always very good at separating the levels of that, especially when a team's really good. I think you're not supposed to. I think they're just supposed to gel together and it's supposed to look great. But I do try to figure out certain ones that I'm enjoying because I want to follow their work. That's a thing for me. So that's kind of where that comes from. But I just want to bring that up just because of the Bob Kane thing when it came up. Batman, let's talk about this. So in the wake of what happened, by the way, that suit of armor thing, you and I were debating over it at the end of that issue. That was just a bookended wink and a nod to the beginning of the series of the end game. That actually was the suit of armor. And that's another one for our listeners. Thank you for people that shouted this one out. That was in the very first opening panels of the story, and this was just meant to be a nod back to that original play that was actually going on. Bruce is gone. I mean, there's going to be a return of Bruce at some point. Of this, I have no doubt. I don't think anybody listening has any doubt. You have no doubt. But for right now, for all extensive purposes, in Gotham, Batman's dead. He's gone. There is no more Batman. The Joker's dead. He's gone. There is no more Joker. So the city's trying to go on. Because of that, we have Powers, CEO, who is trying to let's get Batman up and running again. And we've got, that's Jim Gordon, right?
Yep. Commissioner Gordon is in the bat suit. Outstanding. And it was cool because how they played this out. Because they're showing and he's commenting and he's, just giving the play-by-play as he's getting ready to suit up. Mm-hmm. And it's just talking about Gotham rebuilding. And it's not until that final page that you see where they say Commissioner Gordon. And they actually say, yes, it is actually Jim Gordon suiting up. And I was one, very happy to see that as Gordon because he's the guy who I would want in the suit. But two, I like they did acknowledge his age. And they talk about how you're looking good, that personal trainer. So he's been training and getting ready. It's not just going to, because being in a physical mech suit, that's going to take a lot off of, on you. And it's going to be hard on you, especially if you're not in shape. Well, they're showing that Gordon's been working out. He's getting back in shape. He's getting back down to, the Marine that he is. And I was like, hoorah.
I'm intrigued by the story. I mean, like, just reading the build-up and all that. And that's the point of a teaser like this, is to start pulling you into where the story's going. This did that for me. I'm excited for the story. I'm interested in the story. I already miss Bruce, and that's not a knock on the story. That's the fan in me. I want Batman. Bruce is Batman to me. But the thing is, I'm so entrenched in the world, I want to read this. I want to see where this is going. How does this world deal with no Bruce? I'm going to be looking for any clue or tidbit I can possibly find as to the fate of Bruce Wayne and how we're going to get him back from all of this. But they've got me hooked into this story. I'm definitely intrigued by it. What do you think of the suit? I mean, like, we get to see the visual of the full suit. Like, don't like?
Oh, I definitely like it. It's your tech armor. It's your big, massive body armor. Mm-hmm. It's got the GCPD logo on the side plus the bat symbol. So it is a conjunction of all parties working together. I think one of the more interesting things are going to be is how much of the detective did we lose? Now, we know Jim Gordon's a great detective.
Yeah.
We know that, but he still isn't Batman. And that's part of the thing that makes Batman is his deductive reasoning, his skill set. How much of that are we going to lose within Jim Gordon's story? How much are we going to lose within, Gordon up against some of the rogues galleries or up against some of the crazies that Gotham attracts? This body armor up against, the gangs, hey, this is going to do well. Because this is going to have the whole criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot. Right here, you've got cowardly lot covered. You got rocket launchers. You've got hard, high tech, body armor. This is going to put the fear in them. But it's also going to be an escalation thing. Mm-hmm. Because you think about it, if I'm a gangbanger and I see this coming at me, my first thought is either going to be I'm going to run, or two, I'm going to get some higher tech. I'm going to get some hard armor piercing. I'm going to get some rockets. I'm going to go get, some big old 50 cals and see if I can drop this thing. Those are going to be your mindsets. You're going to get a lot of running, but you're also going to get the other mindset saying, no, okay, fine. You stepped up your game. I'm stepping up mine. I'm going to put down the small caliber. I'm going to go to high caliber. And those are the kind of stories I'm curious to see if this does produce more of that.
Yeah. And I like the armor overall. I'm not a big fan of the bunny ears, but that'll grow on me. And that's the traditional Batman fan in me. That looks very Pikachu to me.
Yeah, I'm hoping they serve some other type of function. That's communications.
I'm assuming that too.
That's what I'm assuming. And if that happens, then I'll enjoy him more. But I do agree with you with the whole Pikachu.
Yeah. I keep expecting to see him go into a poke. Yeah, I keep expecting him to go into a Pokeball or something like that. But overall, the overall look, aside from a few tweaks I would make to it, I think it's cool. I mean, I'm interested into it. I want to see what's going on with it. I'm gonna be curious what happens Because Jim Gordon's been a Batman advocate. Yeah. Now all of a sudden you've got a Jim Gordon who's got to be Batman. That doesn't always fit under a organization. Batman's role and what worked with it, he was a vigilante, which means you can do things that you cannot do in an organized system. It's the truth. What happens when that conflict comes in for Jim Gordon? I can't wait to see that. That's interesting to me. That's where this story's intriguing. That's the other yeah.
That's the other thing. This isn't a vigilante. This is a police officer. So he's going to have certain things that he can't do that Bruce was always able to do.
But
he's going to need to get probable cause. He's going to need the search warrants. He's going to need that type of stuff. And I think that I'm hoping they tackle those type of stories, especially because there's other bad operatives out there. How are they going to deal with this Batman? This isn't Batman. This is a police officer. So are they going to treat him like a police officer, or are they going to treat him like Batman? How's Superman going to treat this guy? These are the things, those are the stories that really have me excited for going forward beyond this.
One of those is his
armor.
Dude, one of those is his daughter.
Exactly. And he doesn't know yet, I'm assuming.
Or if there's any hint of him knowing, which, from time to time they skirt that line, she's not going to know it's him. Because he's not going to. I don't think he's going to be revealing to anybody that that's him under there.
I thought this was going to be knowledge that.
Oh, public knowledge?
I thought this was going to be the way I'm reading this, because they're talking about how the GCPD and Powers are working together to create a new Batman. I'm assuming they're going to tell people that that's Commissioner Gordon in the bounty armor. Because when they walk, in the lobby scene, when they walk past those people, they knew that he was going to suit up into the armor. They knew he was going to be there. So this isn't a carefully guarded secret. To me, it doesn't seem like it's a carefully guarded secret to me. It may not be common knowledge, but the mayor's office knows. The police department knows. There's a lot of people who know that it's Jim Gordon in that armor. So I'm assuming that it's going to be common knowledge that it's Jim Gordon in the body armor.
We'll see. I haven't seen it because I haven't seen the reveal yet. The Powers interview did not reveal that it's Jim Gordon.
Right. They only said they're working with the GCPD, and the news articles said that as well. So it's knowledge that this is a police officer, as I'm assuming. Right. So maybe they don't know which specific police officer is in there, but I don't think it's going to be too difficult for people to figure out that, when this body armor is there, Gordon's not there. Where's Commissioner Gordon?
Well, here's the thing. She's calling him Commissioner Gordon. When we last left him, he wasn't Commissioner Gordon.
True.
Is he really Commissioner Gordon, or is she just calling him Commissioner Gordon? Maggie Sawyer was commissioner.
Right.
This does bring...
Well, because that's the other thing. You see that comment he makes the page before that. You saw the look Sawyer just, yes, and I saw Mayor Handy's face as he snuck that pic. Jerk. So I'm taking it the fact that Maggie gave him a dirty look was more about the fact that you have my job. Why did they reinstate you? I was commissioner. So I'm kind of taking it that he is actually the commissioner.
See, all of these things that we're talking about right now are why I'm so intrigued by the story.
Yeah.
None of these things are spelled out. They're questions still on the table. You can make assumptions, and I don't know which assumption's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. That's part of the fun. I want to see that spelled out. I'm intrigued. They're pulling me in. These are all things that are making this story much more intriguing as we go along. Also, Powers is funding this in cooperation with the Gotham City PD. Corporate benefit, corporate reasons for doing this. What if there's a corporate agenda at work? There's going to be something like that.
There is. Powers is crooked.
Right.
So there's going to be something, and I'm wondering if there's going to be like the RoboCop, Directive 4, where he tries to arrest Powers and Powers pulls out a remote and goes, shut down. I want to see if they're going to do something like that, or if the fact that Powers is able to monitor what exactly the suit's doing and track where he is, and okay, hey, get my guys, you're doing this illegal stuff. Batman's on his way. Move out. If there are going to be stories like that, and if Gordon will figure this out, because Gordon's the honest cop, he ain't going to let that slide. So there's so many story possibilities that are running through my head that I am extremely excited over this. Going, oh man, this is going to be awesome.
Now, let's go on to the Superman story if we could. Because, oof. You know, it's funny. I've been so Batman happy and so excited for what's been going on with Endgame and how that all went. And when the Superman story hit, what a great month. Because Superman is super intriguing to me. Because now we've got Clark Kent. He's on the run. People know he's Superman. And, you know, he's hiding out with Jimmy. His powers haven't completely returned from the fact that he let out the super blast. You know, he's basically in a situation where it's, where do I go from here? People know Clark Kent is Superman. What if this point of the secret identity was his chance to rest and lay low and have a life? What happens when you become Superman 24/7? There's a danger to that. They've always expressed that that's a problem. You know, it's you need to be to not lose touch with the common people, with the regular people. You need to be one of them. You need to be one of us, and to be an Earthling, to be, you know, live life like normal people do. He was been teaching Diana about that. What happens when he can't do that? Because people know that he's Superman. And the problem is his mug's been pasted all over the place now. So he's trying to hide out and change his look in order to do that, but the problem is people are recognizing him now. That changes everything. The blur thing that he used to do before to kind of keep Superman separated from Clark Kent doesn't work.
Yeah.
Everyone knows now. So this changes everything. What a compelling story. This battle was so awesome. I'm going to go on what I said last episode again. John Romita Jr. is nailing it, hitting it out of the park. I am loving his take on Superman. Not just character, but action. These sequences are absolutely gorgeous, from the calm sequences where they're chatting to food trucks being thrown. I mean, it's really terrific, powerful stuff.
Hey, Horace, catch.
Yeah.
I absolutely love as thrilled and excited as I sounded over the Bat stuff, the Superman stuff had me just doing the happy dance. And it was funny because we talked about, before when we announced the new creative team and the reveal, like, are they going to do a secret identity? We didn't know what was going to happen. And I will admit, I was a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, and getting a little taste of how this guy writes the stuff, how he's writing Superman, how he's writing the reveal, everything. I'm very excited as what is going to come down the pipeline here. Because, again, just you get that great banter and just that great little dialogue going on between Jimmy and Clark, where he's like, hey, do you need some money? He's like, no, I'm fine. Up to the point where, you're Clark Kent, aren't you? Nope, no Clark Kent here. This guy's name is Horace. Horace Horseman. Horace Horseman. I was like, what? And even Clark's like, do I look like a Horace to you? That was outstanding. Just lead into really cool fight sequence, great artwork. I'm going to echo sentiments you had about that. I am very excited as to where Superman's going, but also I want to see this full-on reveal. I want to see, did Lois talk to him before she revealed it? How did she handle this? Was it just a bam thrown out there? I want to see that whole process play out. There's so many questions that I have on this.
Wait, no. Hold on. Okay. I think we have that answer right now. Here's where we have it. Look, I heard about what happened this morning. I can't stop thinking about, what I did. I can't stop worrying about you. I should have looked for another way. I had no right. I'm sorry. There's nothing to apologize for. It's the choice you made. Goodbye, Lois. I think we have the answer right there. She never talked to him. She just did it.
See, I don't know. Again, I still don't know if she actually did talk to him out of that. I think she may have gone up to him and said, hey, and he's like, don't do it. I still think there could have been a conversation before this about, telling her don't do it.
I don't think Lois would do that because Lois Lane goes after the story, doesn't ask for permission.
It could be. And again, I that's something I want to get. I like this sequence where, basically he completely shuts her out and he's staying at this getaway motel with, you can kind of tell it's not high end, but he has to keep that low profile. He has to have that. And it's, interesting because she's like, hey, I've got my ways of finding it. And he's like, great. If you could find me, other people can. Basically saying, now I got to move again. And I like just those little bits and pieces where it's going through, what he's dealing with. So this is the kind of stuff I want to see more of this.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, why can't he go to the fortress?
Yeah. But again, I think he wants to try to have some semblance of a human life. Right. If he goes to the fortress, he's living 100% as Kal-El.
Right.
He is no longer Clark Kent. And I think he's still trying to figure out a way to be Clark Kent. And because his mug's everywhere, he can't just say, my name's John Smith now. We saw that with Horace Horseman. It's people recognize his face, so he's got to alter his face. But again, he's got to have the disguise technology, but do you want to have to wear disguise to walk among people? Do you always want to have to? Glasses is one thing, slouching slightly is another, but actually putting on, like the bat, facial disguises that they've used. I can't remember what Batman actually calls it, but he's got that web he puts on the face where it changes the look. He could very easily get his hands on one of those things or have similar technology. He could create that. But I think Clark is trying to be Clark and not have to go that route. And I think that, for me, is going to be the interesting exploration of him trying to, can he figure this out? Or does he have to go that route? Or does he have to go column C that we're not even thinking about?
The Justice League storyline, where we get to see the birth, and it's framed up in what Hippolyta went through with Wonder Woman, but we get to see the birth of Darkseid's daughter and what that looks like. And, what a graphic and compelling story that is.
Again, another oh my God moment. And it was funny because when we talked about those 3 issues, last week, we were like, man, this is awesome. This is unbelievable. And this is a great, free comic book day comic.
Yep.
Because you get these 3 nice tastes on these stories that are going to happen, where it's going through. And I really did dig how this went with the birth of Darkseid's child, with everything, and even the predictions, and you get the glimpses of what's going to happen. And I liked in the one prediction, we see Batman kind of as a new god, sort of. I guess reborn as a new god. Maybe that's how we get him back, but is he really back? I don't know. Again, it's all these mystic, interpretations, seers and predictions and whatnot. Are they actually going to happen this way? Is it not? Can the heroes figure out a way to fix it? Because we also see Hal Jordan in the Green Lantern outfit. And right now, Hal is on the run. He's not a Green Lantern. So does he come back? Does he sacrifice himself? Where, who is going to live? Who's going to die? And I think this, for me, was a great just teaser for the Darkseid War, teaser for future Batman, teaser for Superman, future Justice League stuff. This was an outstanding story.
Well, Batman's Metron in that.
Okay, that's the Metron outfit. Okay.
So how does that happen? The story, the more I see it, has me more and more intrigued.
Yeah.
It's really going to be a great storyline.
And especially the look of, you see, the one panel, I do like Lex Luthor calling out Superman, where are you? If Lex Luthor is calling to Superman for help, that's something huge. And even just that panel of Anti-Monitor versus Darkseid, where you have in the background, you have the Parademons versus something flying. I don't know what those are, but those are Anti-Monitor Army. So, and again, it's all within the destroyed city.
Myrna basically giving in and saying, I'm going to protect my daughter. I want this war to happen. And basically this opening up the whole option that if the daughter lives, the world will die because she'll bring the anti-matter, the anti-god. What I love about this? This is an epic storyline that is taking place in Justice League. And I'm liking that, DC's doing these big crossover events like Convergence and stuff, but then you'll have a great storyline going on in Justice League. I think you need a balance that main titles need to feel like just as much of an event as your event books do. And there's something to that. I'm really excited that so much is spinning out of Convergence that isn't just Convergence. It's other things that are happening in the universe. This Darkseid War, it was on my radar all along, but the excitement for it now, it went from being I'm interested to I can't wait very quickly. Because I really was early on when I was taking Darkseid, I'm like, that'll be a fun read. That'll be a fun story. And it was in that lane. Now it's like, it's a must read. And it's been a while since Justice League has been a must read for me. Where it's been one of those titles where I'm like, wow, Justice League's top of the stack. This has moved Justice League back up the top of the stack.
It went 0 to 50 to me.
Sure.
It was like bam.
Sure.
Because I remembered someone mentioning the Dark Side War, but then everything else that was going on, Endgame, with Superman, with Convergence, it completely got put to the back of my head. And then when we talked about that Justice League, I was like, oh my God. And then this, bam, bam. Wow, I am very excited, very pumped for this. I really want them to get into this. And I'm a very happy camper right now. I'm very excited for monthly titles, for seeing where Convergence goes. Let's get some of these, these new titles we got going on, some continuations of some classic favorites, see where everything goes, and then jump right into this Dark Side War.
Jim, you want to jump to let's talk about Convergence number 5?
Okay.
Our next discussion is going to be about Convergence number 5, written by Jeff King, pencils by Andy Kubert, inks by Sandra Hope Archer, colored by Brad Anderson and Peter Steigerwald, cover by Brad Anderson and Andy Kubert. Publisher is actually I'm reading it from the digital version where it says the publisher's DC Universe. But let's just jump right into this discussion. We were trying to figure out how we wanted to talk about Convergence, and I want to get current with the events that are going on with Convergence because so much has happened that to talk about every single issue of everything that's happened is pretty much an impossibility. One of the big events that we've seen in this one was the death of Batman, the Earth 2 Batman, and it leaving Dick Grayson in a place where this is not a Dick Grayson who had a relationship with Batman prior to really the end of the Earth 2 World's End and the beginning of Convergence. They know each other from just events that have happened very, very quickly. So the inspiration of being Batman's guy is not there. He didn't have that relationship. Neither did Barbara Gordon. This is a guy whose son has gone missing, and he's questioning himself in this issue. And Dick Grayson was really a great focal point for me on this one because he's like, I'm scared, but if I was Batman, if I was more like him, would I have lost my son? Would any of these things happen? I love that he's questioning that, and we're starting to see him kind of the switch clicking on as far as if I'm going to survive this and if I have any hope of finding my son and moving forward, the only way that's going to happen is if I get stronger, if I become something else, if I evolve. Batman starts to be an inspiration for him in a way that's very different than what we've seen before. I'm finding that part of Convergence really compelling right now because he becomes aware in this issue that there's more than one Batman, and there's Batman throughout the multiverse. And in almost all of those cases, the relationship between Dick Grayson and Batman is there. There is a history and a linkage between them, and the handoff is usually there in all those cases. So he has now a decision to make. Is he going to continue that trend? Is that right for him? I love that this feels unique to that experience, and it makes him interesting and compelling. I was latched onto him, not just in this issue, but throughout Convergence to see where his path leads. Really enjoying that part of this.
Oh God, yeah. And Dick Grayson, as throughout this Convergence thing, has been a really cool character, and I love that in whenever Bruce, I keep calling him Bruce, but it's not. It's Thomas. Anytime Thomas was stepping away, Dick was naturally following him. And at first it was because he kind of didn't completely trust the old man. And then it started, okay, I'm going to follow this guy. I'm going to stay. And you start seeing that partnership build up to when Thomas died. Because he hangs back and Dick's like, I'll stay with him. And the reason Thomas hung back is because the rogues from that Bat universe, from that Gotham, followed him, and he figured, hey, we got to buy our friends some time. Whoever followed us is up to no good. And it was the League, the top rogues gallery of that Gotham coming after this, following this Batmobile, following this Batman, and going to cause trouble. And I loved seeing Thomas just, he knew his time was done. Because even Grayson's like, hey, why don't you pop another one of those, Miracle, one of his Miracle. I always tongue tie on that. Why don't you pop one of your pills? Yeah. And Thomas was out. This was it. He was done. He knew this is my last fight.
Miracle is a spotchy word.
Yes. Yes, it is. It's a word I have an issue with, okay? We're just going to say the miracle pills, and I'm just going to go with that instead of trying to say miracle.
Yeah. I'm probably butchering it too, actually.
Yeah, but I love just seeing that, that final, and even how he died. They're beating him down. They had him beat. And how does he go? He goes out with a bang and detonates the Batmobile, detonates and takes out all the rogues.
Hang on, Jim. Demos put me in a Pokeball again. I'm trying to...
Norge, I choose you.
Brainiac popping up that way, I didn't see coming. And actually, but what it does is... it answers a question that I've had since the beginning of Convergence. Telos is doing all this junk. I was like, where is Brainiac? What's going on there? Why hasn't he... we know that this is a character who's evolved over times. Where's he been? I was so glad to see that, Demos brought him in. He restored him. Let us know the status quo of Brainiac. Because, we've seen different storylines of what has happened to Brainiac. I just needed a status update. Where's he at now? Why is he not on the playing field? And what does that mean for Telos? But it also serves as a way for us to get a larger backstory that Telos is not a planet that's come to life. Telos was actually a being before that. It puts a different twist on Telos, adds another layer to this character, and Dick Grayson looks at that as an opportunity. Hey, maybe this isn't a throwaway. Maybe we can use this. And you try to connect with the person that Telos was, where Telos hasn't quite done that yet.
And I love that. I
did
love
too.
that about this Grayson. Because he's like, hey, he's like us. And they even call him on and say, no, he's not no, he is. He's a survivor from a world who's being exploited, just like us. And I love just that immediate connection that Dick Grayson has with this guy. And he's trying to do that reach out. And that, bring him into, maybe we can use this guy with this immense power. Maybe we can reach him. Maybe we can reach the man in there and actually do something good here. And again, it's always been a Dick Grayson type of style, and just that, that positive, and that looking for life, right in the face of all this death. No matter which universe it is, that is still Dick Grayson. I was so excited to see that. Demos
on this one, seeing him, what he's done to Travis Morgan's people. Travis's wife's died. His machiste, his right-hand man's died. Demos is making major changes. How he affects the time travelers and pulls them in. He's doing the ultimate power play here. He's becoming the ultimate power player. What does that mean in this battle now that he's trying to, in this issue, we see him go, okay, you want to play this game? What happens if I offer people a different choice? None of you want to kill each other, right? Or majority of you don't want to kill each other, right? What if I give you option C? It's A, B, but now you got C. Join with me. All you got to do is give me your loyalty, and y'all live. Nobody has to die.
I think there's going to be more to it. I think that's the thing, I think Demos is going to need something else from them. And I think it's going to be life energy or something like that. I think they're going to have to sacrifice people to them. Well, because we saw him pull the energy from those time bandits, from all the time people. I'm thinking he's going to need to pull more energy out from people. And he's going to need that to keep control of the planet. And I think that's going to be the payment, because he talks about that, how, you just got to give me, you just got to give me what I need. And, he's even when he's addressing all of them saying, hey, I'll let you live, but you got to give something to me. You got to give me something. And I think we're going to find out what the price that Demos needs or wants for this. And I think that is something kind of cool.
But what if the price, going off of that, and your point's well met, this isn't to dispute you, but even the price of him being your ruler, you're giving up your freedom. You are. You're basically trading one jailer for another, because basically you've been yanked from your world, and now you have a new ruler, and it's Demos. You didn't elect him. Demos is going to have laws and rules and expectations that are not going to be the ones that you had before. These are very different worlds that had very different rule sets previously. And what happens to you if you step outside of those rules? It's a different sort of, regardless, the price of that alone is, you've gone from, most of these planets have presidents. You've gone to a dictator, an ultimate ruler, emperor, god, whatever you want to call him. Yeah. He wants that power to protect them. It's going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out with this story. It took a turn that I didn't expect. And
now,
good.
With Brainiac, he looks like he's trapped in a T-sphere.
I saw that too.
I'm wondering if that's actually how Brainiac got trapped somehow.
Are those just those time travel spears, though?
It could be. It could also be the bubble. It could be how it is.
Yeah.
But that was the first thing that popped in my head when I saw that.
Right.
Where you see because it's got it has a T on it. It looks like the window, but that's the window viewing in to see Brainiac in there.
Right.
Because before, when the time travelers, when you go through issue 3 and 4, and you see the time travelers, it's not that T on there. So to me, it looks like Brainiac was somewhere else, and he used the power from the time travelers to pull this present version of him. He's like, he can't see the past or the future of Brainiac, but he's able to see the present version, and that's what he flashes in front of him, and then he banishes it away at the end of the issue.
Yeah. I don't really have an answer for you on that one.
Yeah,
I noticed it too. I guess I didn't assume it was a T-spear, but there's no reason to say it isn't.
Yeah.
I was looking through the Booster Gold issue, looking at his time travel machine to see if it looks anything like that. I guess I thought it had something to do with the time travel machines that all of them had. That was my assumption.
Yeah, those just look like kind of like the Legion of Superheroes. They're time bubbles.
Right.
And that's what I thought those were all using and trapped in and whatnot. And I thought this was something different. But it could just be wanted to open up so you could see, and they just happened to open it up that way. I'm not sure. But it just, I don't know. Yeah. There's still questions. And I think that's one of the neat things about this, that there's still questions being raised. There's still questions as to how did Brainiac get captured? How did all this happen?
What if you find... Oh, good.
No, what?
What if you found out... I'm kind of looking at this Telos sequence, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Because the Telos thing is very interesting to me. What if you woke up, Jim, and found out that you are not who you think you are? There was a whole other life before that. And would you be in denial? Would you accept it? That's what Telos is going through it here. He's been given a lot. He doesn't have his name. He doesn't know what that is yet. But he saw all of it and saw himself before. How would you deal with that? I mean, I find that compelling.
Yeah. And I think that was a kind of a cool moment within this. How, with Demos had this info and he had this knowledge. And you see, because they talk about at the very beginning of the issue where Dick Grayson's commenting on how he's afraid. If he was more like Batman, maybe I wouldn't be afraid. But the scariest thing is seeing Telos afraid. And you see that fear in Telos' eyes. And as this goes through, his brain goes bye-bye. It's information overload. And how do you deal with that? On one hand, I could make a quick joke, hey, I'd love to have a different life than this one. But in reality, if I lost all my memories, or if I found out all my memories were fake, and I really was something else, that would really mess me up. You think about stories like with, the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Total Recall.
Well, this is a lot more like Total Recall, except here's the difference. In Telos' case, he did live this life as Telos. There was just a life before that. So Telos isn't a lie. Telos is something that legitimately happened. He was Telos. But before that, he was something else and ripped apart from something else. There's a history.
RoboCop.
Yeah. This
is RoboCop.
Very much so.
We saw in RoboCop how he was desperate to cling to those memories and how he needed to have that. And then even to the point where, like in RoboCop 2, where he's kind of stalking his ex-wife and, and they're dealing with all that type of craziness, that he's dealing with the fact that he isn't Murphy anymore. He's RoboCop. Telos has that it would drive me absolutely nuts if I were to find out that my life was something completely different. Or 50 First Dates, rom-com, Adam Sandler, Drew Barrymore. She wakes up every day and she thinks it's the day she had this accident. So it's been years, but in reality to her, it's that same day. And she's got to relive. She's got a video she watches and a book she reads and stuff like that, where it tells her progression of her life. And I love that movie, but I always sometimes will go off page and just think, how crazy would it be if, like, you pick one point in time in life and that's where your memories stop? From then on, any new experience, you're not going to have that memory. You're only going to have if you write it down or if you document it in a movie or a book or whatnot. That would be really tough, especially those first moments of realization when you realize, hey, everything in my head is wrong, or it's not completely wrong. It's just there's a massive, massive amount of relevant information that's missing. I think that showing his shock was a really cool way of him handling it. I want to see issue 6, 7, 8, see how he deals with this. See if Dick Grayson or the Earth 2 heroes can maybe pull him out of it and actually get him to rebound.
Yeah, that's part of the things that I find that's really interesting about this. There's multiple stories going on. This started out as what seemed to be a very simple story. But as it's progressed, it's become more and more complex with more and more twists and turns. The Skartaris thing, when it first came in, I'm kind of like, okay, Skartaris is just another trapped place, having no idea that Skartaris is huge with the fact that Deimos has been having his own plan that he's been hatching underneath, pulling out time travelers and capturing them and using them to make a power play here to capture Brainiac. Deimos really had the ultimate plan on the inside, and this was what Telos was afraid of underground. Really good stuff.
And we see in the Booster Gold Convergence tie-in that this is the actual Skartaris. This isn't a trapped world or a trapped city like everything on the surface. This is actually where Skartaris is. And it's right by the vanishing point. It's in the same neighborhood as the vanishing point. So this planet is somewhere else off there, within the time sphere. Mm-hmm. So that's why Skartaris is that super freaky way to get to it. And it's not just a lost world inside Earth, which I always thought it was. It's another planet. It's another dimension. It's pulled from the space-time continuum itself. And I loved seeing that play out in the booster, play out in this, throughout the story, and just, letting us know this is where Skartaris is. And I think that was something that I was like, man, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was something that really did surprise me about this, was the way that Skartaris wound up being such a pivotal part of this, because it's not something you usually think of as being such a focal point. I'm glad they're using it, though, because it's a big part of DC lore. Totally fits how this will all...
It's weird that, because I've read some of the Warlord, and we've talked about it in the past when they did that relaunch, how I really didn't know the characters or anything, but going into this, throughout these issues, seeing, the Warlord, and I was remembering, oh yeah, I remember the one-armed guy, I remember the one-hand guy, I remembered the Catwoman and his, and his queen and everything, the kind of, the relationship, kind of interesting relationship the three of them had and whatnot. So when seeing them play throughout this and seeing that Skartaris they actually has this real home, it was kind of interesting for me because of with his death, with how they did kill him off, how they killed off Machete and how they killed off all the different people. And I was like, it kind of did affect me that I was like, I'm hoping that somehow they figure out a way to bring them back. But again, they're dead right now. Travis Morgan was completely turned to dust. The special thing that prevented the aging, that was taken away. And again, it was all because of Deimos' powers from the Time People, because of his magic and everything that he's doing. And I liked seeing that, and it was a cool reaction for me, but I really especially loved the Earth 2 heroes recognize, okay, here's the bad guy. We've been deceived. I loved seeing them all just step up and start fighting. And again, it's the really cool hero moments of, Superman, of Flash, of Dick Grayson, kind of Batman-esque with the carving the icon onto his chest. I was very excited to see all this stuff kind of play out.
Yeah, I like how it's been a journey to him becoming Batman in a very, very different way than what we see before. You know who I'm really starting to love? The Earth 2 Superman.
Yes, big time.
Because I thought that he was, with being Zod's son and everything like that, they were going to do that, and he was going to be one of the casualties of the Earth 2 World's End. I so love that he wasn't, because the bit where he's like, magic might hurt me, but it won't stop me, and you see Deimos you'd see him dragged. As Superman's pushing against him. I loved seeing that Superman moment. I love that this Superman has a unique personality, and I really am enjoying getting to know him. It's really good material.
Yeah, and I tell you, I really dig the costume.
I
I love
too.
the fact that he does have the House of L symbol on his chest, but it's not your traditional symbol. It is changed around. That's a cool look, and it's a good way to keep honoring what it is, but it's not completely beholden to what the classic Superman look is. And it's funny because I really do feel comfortable calling him Superman. This is Superman. He's got he's not actually our Kal-El. He's not their guy, but guess what? He has that same heart. He's got that same true hero in him. And he is a little bit different, but you know what? He still is Superman. This is Superman for all my concerns. This is Earth 2 Superman. I really dig that. And I love the fact that in all these different worlds, we are getting those type of characters. Like Thomas Wayne, this Earth 2 Batman was completely different. If Dick Grayson does assume the mantle, which I'm assuming he's going to, he'll be a little bit different, but he'll still have that same Batman quality. This definite Superman has a definite Superman quality. I'm really, excited I want more of the stories of these characters.
One of the things that I really liked was when the Earth 2 team got back together earlier on in the issue, they were deferring to Batman as their strategist.
Yeah.
And without missing a beat, they start coming up with new plans that are very different than Batman would have come up with, but because they're heroes and they've got to keep moving on. I liked that moment a great deal. It was great to see how that played out. Another powerful moment in this was Travis and his wife. I think one of the things I'm really liking as Convergence has gone on, it started off very simple and introducing us to this world. As it's gotten with each issue and more complex, we're seeing great moments with great characters. Big fan of Warlord here. And I loved seeing Travis have such a moment where that line is, rest here, my love. I'll return with help, or I'll be joining you soon. And just, that idea of, hoorah, I want to see him get in there and kick some butt is really great. I love seeing characters have great moments in a big universe-defining event. I love that this event continues to feel unique. It doesn't feel like something we've read before. There's something to that. It feels like a big event, and sure, it's got certain staples that you are familiar with in big events, but its presentation is very, very unique. And I love that this does feel like a different sort of story, especially with the worlds trapped under their domes and having to then combat each other. They don't know the larger battle that's going on. They don't know about any of this. This is all stuff that they're kind of background characters until the end of the issue, where Demos kind of reveals, hey, guess what? Hi, I'm the new face of freedom. I mean, come on. Wow.
I am the new man here. I am
right.
it. I'm the big cheese now. And again, it was like, that was a really cool villain moment. You think about just your traditional villain bragging and just that, right there, that was the ultimate villainous rant going on. And not only that, but he's got the power to back the rant right now. But again, I do wonder how much of that power is going to last. How much, is bravado? How much of that is actually, can he continue that? With Telos, it looked like he had complete omnipotent control over the planet, but in this issue, we do see he gets knocked down a peg, but it's kind of more of a psychological edge, not an actual power blast that Demos is able to get to him. So I think if Telos can push through it, he can overtake Demos. I think Demos's power is a very temporarily, obtained thing. It's nothing. It's not like he is the planet like Telos is. So that for me is something I want to see where this kind of goes. Maybe that's what Demos needs when he says there's a price. Maybe he needs a continual beatdown of Telos, or maybe he needs power from them, or maybe he needs something like that to keep the thing going.
Or an army.
Or maybe he needs an army. I don't know. With
Yolanda, that was interesting. She gets left behind of no intention of theirs, but gets pulled up and, basically is going to have to make a decision. Am I with Demos? But he talks about restoring her. She used to be Wildcat, and he says that you used to be Wildcat, and I'm talking about when you were Wildcat in your existence. Don't worry, it'll be back here soon enough. What does that mean?
Again, he's tapping into the Brainiac power. He's tapping into the time power, and he can maybe do some of this. Maybe again, he can do the stuff that Telos is able to do. I don't know. Or is he again throwing out stuff to try to get alliances, try to keep her from fighting him?
Wow.
Again, you can't really trust Demos. It was neat because when they first brought him in, I knew he was a bad guy, but with this story, you never really know who are the bad guys until they actually reveal themselves. And I liked how they periodically slowly revealed this. Yes, this is the bad guy Demos that you know.
Yeah, I can't wait to see where this is going to go. It was an interesting twist, and it got me really excited to continue reading the story as it goes forward. This has been a surprising series. I thought it was going to go one way, and I love that it's surprising me with where it's going to go.
Oh, big time surprise for me and big time excitement for me. Especially, as I said earlier, I especially enjoy that it's not just Fight Club. It's not just Mortal Kombat. We're actually getting stories within these individual cities. We're getting a solid Convergence story about these characters, the growth of them, the birth of this team. So I definitely want this to mean something. Even if it only means something for the Earth 2 heroes, I want this story to mean something.
I agree.
Viva Las Vegas! Viva Las Vegas! That's right, the sensei of Whatnot is in his second favorite town. First favorite being my hometown of Cleveland. I am in Vegas. And I'm actually just got done with the day 2 of Wizard World Con in Vegas. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make Sundays because I've got to get back home because I couldn't do the extra day. So had 2 really cool days, had some fun time at the con, picked up some neat stuff. Probably go a little bit more in detail on that when we play this on the episode. Let's see here. Had some really cool readings. Marvel's, yes, I know Marvel. X-Men Battle of the Atom, but of course I'm not going to talk about it now. We'll be talking about that later with Ian. And I don't know who else. Convergence also got a con. I was able to pick up Convergence number 3, which is, so now this will be like my second copy of it because I have it sitting back home, but I didn't want to wait. Had to pick it up, had to read it, and Sean and I will talk about that later. Let's see here. Of course, I've got some really cool stuff with Convergence Catwoman, Convergence Aquaman, Shadow of the Bat, Green Arrow. I brought Multiversity with me, and I'm just going to try to read that and get that kind of cleared away. Normally, I would be making this phone call from a bridge in Vegas where there's a few walkways, but they're my bridges. But to be honest, it's raining outside, and I'm not going to stand in the rain. Yeah, I have a level of dedication to the podcast, and it includes not getting wet. But, well, yeah. Look forward to talking a little about this Vegas trip. Had some fun times. Had some not so fun times at the tables. Oof, we got beaten bad at the tables. It was not a pretty sight. And I leave you with this funny note of the walking peanuts. But I'm just going to leave it at that. Let you figure out what is exactly the walking peanuts. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.
Actually, you showed me the walking peanuts when we met up this week. I went to Riff Tracks The Room, and you and I met for dinner, and you showed me that, which is, it's the Walking Dead set to Peanuts, or it's Peanuts set to the Walking Dead theme, I should say. And it was Charlie Brown was Rick Grimes, and you got to see, basically everybody else was all of the other characters from The Walking Dead. It was really cool. I love those kind of mashups when they take characters from famous cartoons and they put them into other environments like that. I'm a fan of that stuff.
Walking Dead was huge at the con, where everybody had some type of mashup with Walking Dead and or with zombies. And this one, I'm walking past the guy's booth, and I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, that is awesome. It was, if it made me stop and say, wow, that's awesome, I picked it up. I picked up some other Walking Dead artwork. I picked up Calvin and Hobbes' Doctor Who little kind of sketch thing. I also got a really cool thing signed by Ethan Van Sciver, a Flash print, so that was kind of a neat thing. Vegas Con was really fun. Had some really great times. That was, that was a really
Jim,
nice.
you left out the fact that you walked away with 2 cosplayers and 2 of the vehicles that you also thought were awesome.
Oh yeah, and that too. But hey, we're keeping that quiet because that's kind of illegal. Dictionary on the kidnapping bay.
I love that line. You're like, if I saw it and it looked awesome, I grabbed it.
Yeah, the pictures I did pay for. So
okay. What those cons are great. It's always I'm loving the just increasing attendance at cons that comes from the fact that, and we talked about this a little earlier on the episode, it's so nice to see people who are casual fans coming to cons, because I think those are open opportunities for people to reach out. What was the comic presence like at this con? Because it is one of the things I've noticed with the Wizard cons. I really enjoy the diversity that's there, but I'm noticing less and less of a comic presence. Was Vegas like that, or was there?
That is. I think that was probably the only downside. They did have some vendors there, and they did have some type of dealers there, but they didn't have any of the big companies there. They didn't have. They had a couple panels where there was a couple comic creators talking about the process. There was a couple people who were just like starting off on how do you launch your own. They had a podcast panel that I wanted to attend, but it kind of went up against Robert Englund, so I chose to go to Freddie instead of the podcast one because the Robert Englund was absolutely outstanding, and you've always talked about how great that panel was. So I'm like, I think I'm going to go this way. But so there was a kind of a presence, but it was more media presence. Like Michael Rooker had this absolutely wonderful panel. If he ever has a panel and you're at a con, go to it. He is absolutely hysterical. He is just bam, in your face, explosive, fun time. David Morrissey, who plays the governor on Walking Dead, he had a panel. I went to that one. Another wonderful panel. He starts talking. He starts telling you some backstories behind some of the scenes, and just you get him going, and you're just like, man, this guy is really cool. Plus, he's got a whole other acting repertoire. Robert Englund mentioned again, Freddie, but he's more than just that. It's a very entertaining, he's got this great presence where he's not just a guy sitting up on stage talking. He's actually feels like you're having a conversation with him. So it's, it was some really cool stuff going on. So,
you talked about a couple of the Convergence issues, the Shadow of the Bat and stuff like that. It was great to see Asbats again. We didn't really get a chance to talk about that in our earlier discussion. I was a big fan of the Gene Paul Valley Asbats character. Not that I wanted him to see him like permanently stay as Batman. I wanted Bruce back. Like the second in that Nightfall storyline that Bruce started appearing in, the tie-in issues that they had to Nightfall that were happening in some of the other Bat books, where he became the focal point. It was Legends of the Dark Knight, and I believe it actually was Shadow of the Bat, where Bruce was part of that story. I was always glued immediately to the Bruce Wayne quest to find Chandra Kinsolving, which was the doctor that was working with him, but also how it was leading to him becoming Batman again, to recovering from what happened to him, and seeing that even in a wheelchair he was, and it was Justice League Task Force too that he was in. I loved seeing that. So to see Gene Paul Valley back again in the Asbat suit, I always liked that suit. I thought it was a cool suit. I didn't want to see Bruce in it, but I really loved the suit. And it's something that, like, it's available in one of the Batman games as a selectable alternative suit, and I love throwing that on and playing with it in the game as one of the skins, just because it really looks awesome.
Yeah, I dig that. And I had a very little experience with Asbats, but it was something that, again, reading that issue, I was like, man, that's kind of cool. And just, again, you get that comfort level where they're bringing him into it, and especially how that issue, because that was a lot of Bruce Wayne focused, and Bruce Wayne was doing a lot of stuff in that issue. It wasn't just a Batman issue. It wasn't just an Asbats issue. There was that issue in particular was a really cool. I was like, man, it was beyond just the Fight Club. It was an actual story of life inside the dome.
Yeah, that's what I've liked that part of the tie-ins. I've liked the life inside the dome. I liked seeing how, based on the background and the era that the heroes were from, they handled life in the dome differently, just because it was a different ideology, a different thought process. So that's been that diversity of storytelling. If there's one of them that you maybe hadn't read or you weren't a part of that particular portion of an era, it was very easy to jump on the next one because it was one that you were more connected with. But I found that there were ones that I was learning something new that I really enjoyed. I found there were ones where I was revisiting old friends that I enjoyed. Asbats was one that I would be remiss if I didn't mention how much I enjoyed reading the Asbats storyline. You know what one I really enjoyed too? Action Comics with Power Girl.
Yeah.
Seeing the Earth 2 Power Girl. And, the fact that she had a life going and that Lois, seeing the golden age Lois and Clark having moments together trying to deal with life, and how that one dealt with the idea that because you're under the dome, it can become very easy, like you having an illness or something like that becomes your identity. And all of your conversations revolve around that. And she, at one point in time, snaps and goes, can we have one night where we don't revolve it around talking about the dome?
Yeah.
And I loved that part of it. I thought there was something rich to that. So there's so many cool things going on in this Convergence event. I really like the life under the dome stuff.
And with that issue, that's also where Clark reveals that he's Superman to everybody, because that was the issue where because the person's like, yeah, you're Superman, right? Yeah. And even the fact that, did you reveal, the guy asked him, hey, did you reveal that you're Superman because you think this is permanent? And he's like, no, this is all about us, sticking, and he was still Superman. He was still that, no, this is all about us working together. We're going to get through this. This is temporary. We're going to work through this. We're Metropolis strong. And I just love just how, even though he wasn't in the costume, even though he didn't have any powers, he still was Superman at that moment. And the fact that he told people I am Superman wasn't about scared. It was about hope, and he was still being that that person of hope. I was like, those were some of the cool. That was Action Comics was one of those that I really digged, even though I didn't really read this Superman or this Power Girl that much. I've actually read almost none of this era. But I still had that great connection with it.
Infinite Crisis would be probably your biggest exposure.
I think that was my only exposure.
Mm-hmm. Well, and afterwards, because then the Golden Age Superman stuck around.
Yeah.
So it was really good to see that era back again for myself. And Legion, Superboy and the Legion. It was nice to see that classic era of Legion of the Superheroes back again. And we saw them multiple times. They popped up both being the focal point of a book and also being the background in a book.
Yeah, I dig the Legion. And it's one of those that I don't get a chance. I don't talk about them that much, but I always, whenever I read a cool Legion story, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I feel comfortable with them, but I still don't know names. And it's when they throw out their real names, if they're not in their costume, I got to do some research. I'm like, okay, who is that again? Oh, okay, I do get confused with that. I do like when they have their roll call in the beginning of the books usually, because I'm like, oh, okay, that's so and so. All right, got it. Okay, that's Lightning. Okay, got it.
Yeah, overall, it's just been a fantastic event for that. I think there's a little something for everybody. And obviously for longtime DC fans who've read a lot more of the material, there's something, huge for them. I like that there's something for everybody. I think you can pick and choose out of those, or you can grab the whole thing. And I think there's something for you, depending on your reading history with DC. And I like that they all felt like closure, and I mean that in a good way. I feel like, they're nice epilogues to those stories. Sometimes they're happy endings for certain characters. Other times it's answering certain questions maybe that you've always had. Those are things that I'm really digging from them. I'm very anxious for issue 2 in that round to go through and see a number of these books and how they end up paying off.
Holy caffeine!
Want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. And actually on this episode, you got to hear a voicemail message that Jim called in from when he was in Vegas. So be sure to call in with your thoughts on comics and anything going on in the DC universe or related to pop culture media. We'd love to hear from you. If you got something to shout out, please feel free to also release that on the podcast. You have a podcast you want to shout out, you have a blog or something, feel free to call in with those as well. We love shouting out our friends on the podcast. Speaking of our friends, let's talk about the Raging Bullets Facebook group. I love the Facebook group community. If you've never been a part of a Facebook group, I encourage you to join. Facebook groups are great. There's settings where if you don't like getting constant email messages from a Facebook group, you can control that in the settings. So keep that in mind when you join a Facebook group. You have the ability to shut those on and off. But you can also, I like popping into a variety of Facebook groups, joining in the discussion, reading discussions. The community that we have, it's such a wonderful group of people that have really taken it just so far beyond anything relating to our podcast. They talk about television shows. They have Google Hangouts. They talk about comic releases. They talk about specific happenings in comics and their thoughts on it and where they think things are heading. It's a safe, fun community of positive fans who are really enjoying comics and related pop culture material. People shout out blogs and podcasts and things there as well. It's an open community. Please join and consider being part of the discussion. It's just such a wonderful Facebook community. We also have a regular Facebook page, which is a static page where we update with new releases of podcast episodes. Jim and I have personal Facebook pages. We have a show website. It's ragingbullets.com. It feeds right into our Raging Bullets Twitter. So please consider, whether either you're checking out our website or you're following us on Twitter. That's a great way to find out news about what's going on with the podcast. And we are on Google+. You can find us there as well. So we're basically all over social media, anywhere you need to find us. And we just love interacting with you guys. And I'm on the PlayStation Network. Actually, this week I had like 5 people from that are relating to the podcast that added me on. If you are on the PlayStation Network, feel free to add me. I would love to interact with you in that method as well. So it's really great to be a part of that larger community. And thank you to everybody who added me. Jim, DCBService.com. What they got going on?
Oh, they got bundles, and they got more bundles, and I'm absolutely excited and thrilled. We have bundles on the new series, bundles on returning series, the 50% off of the returning, 50% off of the new series being launched, but we also have 45% off variant cover Teen Titan Go. Woohoo!
InStockTrades.com has their 50% off deals of the week. They always are running amazing deals. They have the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 hardcover. That's 50% off only $17.49. Batman Earth 1 hardcover Volume 2, 50% off only $12.49. Captain America Omnibus, Return of the Winter Soldier, 50% off only $49.99. Secret Wars Prelude, 50% off $17.49. Dial H Deluxe contains the first 16 issues of that series, 50% off only $17.49 for a hardcover with 16 issues. Really great stuff. They're changing those every week, so make sure to check them out and see what's going on over at InStockTrades.com. We want to thank both of those sites for supporting our show. Jim, our next episode, we're going to continue talking Convergence and all of the craziness that's going on in Convergence. We'll continue talking the weekly book. We will also talk about some of the tie-in issues and what's going on with them a little more depth, because we have the issue 2s coming out now. This past week released the first, week 5, which is the first week of issue 2s. So we're starting to see some of these stories wrap up and how they will pop back into the Convergence event. So I'm excited to have a conversation about how we're liking these stories as they wrap up. And we'll talk more about that next week.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can 2 grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.